Hi, welcome back guys, this is your friend, WTFW with another fiction. What if DEKU class won a challenge on Naru Island? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Snowflakes fell lightly over the mountain road. It was well past midnight with vehicles zooming along the pavement, far from a bright city in the distance. Headlights glared on as about 4 sports cars were in pursuit of a large armored truck. In the red vehicle leading the chase, and at the wheel was Rock Lock, while beside him another hero with a costume similar to that of a medieval knight. They were the first to make their approach on the armored truck, coming up on its right. With the exhausts pumping out flames to give their car a final push, they approached the driver's window. And inside, they saw the lizard-like face of Spinner. "That's Shuichi Iguchi," Rock Lock exclaimed upon recognizing him. "So it is the League of Villains," the knight-like hero realized, sticking his head out of the window as he made the barrel-like fingers of his left hand come together in the form of a machine gun. Before he could attempt to fire, though, Spinner turned the steering wheel of the truck to the right, crushing the car against the adjacent wall of the road and causing it to move off the ground. Rock Lock grimaced as he tried to steer the vehicle out of its pinned position. Sparks flew through the window they rode against as both heroes ended up squishing together. Thankfully, their vehicle found its way out of the literal hard place as the left door fell off while they swerved, managing to regain traction on the road as they continued their pursuit with the 3 other cars. In the meantime, Spinner moved the truck to the left to pin the blue sports car against the railing beside the cliff. After a few moments, it ended up flipping over the railing and plummeting down below in a massive explosion. Seeing that frustrated the gunner hero. "Damn it," he cursed, firing off a flurry of shots from his left hand while holding it steady with his right. Unfortunately, his bullets did little more than dent the back of the truck's metal doors. "No luck," he yelled out. "Then let's get closer," Rock Lock decided, taking a tighter grip on the steering wheel. Their car zoomed forward along the road after the armored truck, turning around the bend. The gunner hero readied his right arm, shattering the windshield with another spray of bullets that were aimed for the truck. Again, they just seemed to only dent the doors as sparks flew about wildly with each impact. All of a sudden, glass shattered from the right side window of the truck. Sticking out from it was Dabai, who held out his left hand as blue sparks came off of it. Rock Lock grimaced in realization. He swerved the car as a plume of blue flames was about to engulf them. "Deadbolt," he yelled, making the steering wheel glow a bright red. The car then flipped over, landing on its side as it locked in place, and took the flames from the villain to its undercarriage, shielding a silver car as it rode up the hill beside the road. "Sorry, we're out," Rock Lock apologized, carrying the gunner hero out of the inflamed vehicle they were in. The silver car practically leapt over the armored truck from its climb up the hillside, landing in front of it as its front end was severely damaged. "Take this," a blonde-haired, spectacled female hero exclaimed, sticking out of her vehicle's sunroof as she flung out electrically charged whips towards the truck. Spinner pushed his foot against the pedal hard. The truck rammed into the silver car, knocking it aside as it spun out, while the electric hero bounced hard along the road. Now only one car was left in pursuit of the villains. "Upsy daisy," Mr. Compress grunted as he opened a hatch at the truck's roof to stick himself out. "So very persistent," he remarked, prepping a trio of blue marbles in between the fingers of his left hand. He flung them out onto the road. They glowed brightly before popping open to reveal a metal that dug into the pavement like a spike trap. The lone pursuit vehicle couldn't stop in time, striking the fence and flipping over across the road before getting caught up in an explosion. However, Compress noticed a black-gloved hand reach up to the truck's roof from its end. "What are you up to?" the lone hero began as he clawed himself up, revealing that he had a left laser eye prepped to fire. "You bastards," he yelled out. "You expect us answer that?" Dabai retorted in question upon sticking himself up beside Compress, launching a blast of blue flames from his left hand. They engulfed the hero as he screamed in agony, falling off of the truck. Meanwhile, Spinner smacked his right fist against the steering wheel in frustration. How do the heroes know our route? He wondered angrily, clenching his teeth. Someone must have talked, Dabai muttered as a suggestion. A leak? Compress exclaimed out of shock. Who is it? He inquired with anger present in his tone. How should I know? Dabai grumbled in question. The cargo the three of them were carrying was a large, fluid-filled tank that harbored a humanoid figure. It glowed an ominous violet, illuminating the rest of the hold. Spinner looked into the lone mirror at his left and saw a headlight approaching from behind. Heads up, he called out, catching the attentions of his comrades. We've got one more on our tail, he loudly told them. Compress and Dabai looked to see that it was an orange and black dirt bike after them with a helmeted motorist. A lone actor trying to upstage our grand escapade? The masked man atop the truck inquired sarcastically, readying a trio of blue marbles upon each hand. I don't think so, he yelled, flinging out the marbles onto the road. As they bounced, they glowed a bright blue, uncompressing to reveal 6 large rocks about to crush the lone motorist. However, the driver weaved the bike through each one that came its way, continuing the pursuit. Not bad, Compress uttered out, sounding stunned. Ha, Dabai chuckled, igniting his left hand with blue flames. Let's see him dodge this, he remarked, firing off a stream of cobalt fire onto the pavement, heading for the motorist. All of a sudden, the bike and its driver disappeared in a flash of golden light, evading the flames. What? Compress exclaimed in disbelief. The motorist then reappeared about a dozen yards behind them, keeping on the truck's tail. TCH, Dabai scoffed. But then he noticed something, and his eyes widened at the sight of the long red and yellow streaked hair flying out from beneath the motorist's helmet. Lizard, step on it, he suddenly yelled down to Spinner, who blinked in surprise. What's wrong? He stammered back, startled by how desperate the charred-skinned man sounded. It's not just the heroes after us anymore, he shouted. The Omni Force is on our tail, he exclaimed. The Omni Force? Compress repeated in shock. Then, the pursuant behind us is, he started to realize, grimacing under his mask. The chaser on the dirt bike was none other than Sunset Shimmer. I'm still in pursuit, but the rest of the team is out, she yelled into an earpiece within her left pony ear. We're heading towards your location, she added through the communication line. Having listened to her further down the road was Endeavor, who was gathered with many other heroes. Copy that, he responded, lowering his left arm from his ear. You can leave the rest to me, he assured as the truck was on its approach. Ah, Spinner gasped, widening his eyes. Endeavor, he exclaimed. The lead actor in this heroic farce, Compress muttered upon noticing who was ahead, while Dabai prepped himself by igniting his right hand with cobalt blue flames. Workin' so late at night, he noted, sounding impressed as the flame hero took a ready stance and ignited his fist in fire, while the others hurried off for cover. I hope you get no retirement, he shouted, firing off a stream of blue flames towards his foe. Jet burn, Endeavor roared, launching a fiery beam from his fist. The attacks collided in a fierce torrent of orange and blue fire, which dissipated quickly. The flame hero scoffed in frustration. Better get out of the way, Spinner yelled from the driver's seat of the truck as he pressed down hard on the gas pedal. I don't mind running you over, he mentioned loudly. Endeavor wasn't intimidated. He crossed both of his arms over his face. Now would be a good time to duck, Dabai advised to Compress, enticing him to jump back into the truck as his comrade lit both of his hands up with blue flames. Heat built up around Endeavor's body as his flames roared wildly. His pyrokinetic foe had his blue fire build up as well. He unleashed a huge stream of it towards the flame hero, who still appeared to be charging himself up. But not for long. Prominence, he began to echo as the flames burned brightly and billowed mightily around him, sparking as he uncrossed his arms. Burn, he roared, unleashing a massive burst of fire that completely engulfed Dabai's and the armored truck. Sunset screeched her bike to a halt to avoid the fire, watching as her target moved on through it. The vehicle started to hit the side railing as the fire had surrounded it, burning through the windows. Damn, Spinner inwardly cursed as he was trying desperately to brace himself from the flames. Time's up, he realized before the entirety of his body dissolved into a brownish sludge. Endeavor, Dabai uttered inwardly before he and Compressed also fell apart into the same substance before the fire engulfed them. Endeavor propelled himself up off of the road by shooting flames from his feet, avoiding the fiery truck as it rolled towards the bend with its tires screeching. Without a driver, it crashed through the railing and tumbled down the mountainside into the forest. From afar, Sunset lifted up her visor and sighed. "Celestia, damn it," she muttered in frustration. It was only a little while later that the truck was found near a river, lying on its side. A certain individual had already arrived on the scene as Endeavor came down to the crash site. "HM?" he uttered upon seeing who it was after landing. "What are you doing, Hawks?" he asked the wing hero as he approached, seeing that the red-winged man was crouched down beside the truck, inspecting it carefully as he rubbed at his head. "If you were here, you could have given us a hand," he pointed out. Hawks stood up. "Oh, don't bite my head off, Endeavor," he pleaded casually. "I just now flew in," he claimed with a sheepish grin. "HMPH," the flame hero scoffed. Hawks then blinked as he noticed something. "And speaking of flying," he began, enticing Endeavor to turn and see Sunset soaring down thanks to her angelic wings. As she landed down, she took off her helmet and shook her head to straighten her hair out. "You had to burn the truck," she muttered to Endeavor, who instantly grimaced. "I didn't see you try to stop it," he argued back. She let out another deep sigh. "Let's call it even and say we both fucked up," she decided bluntly, walking past him. The flame hero was left speechless. How Sunset was so foul-mouthed, yet so fair with others, was mind-boggling to him. "Hey, Angel," Hawks greeted with a wave as the Omni Force squadron leader approached. "Hey, Hawks," she responded. "Where's the League?" she asked as she glanced around. "They were doubles, courtesy of Twice," the wing hero replied, seeing her squat and look through the shattered windshield. She narrowed her eyes on the small traces of brown sludge on the driver's seat. Moments later, the back doors to the truck were pried open thanks to her pulling them off telekinetically with her magic, letting them fall to the ground. Endeavor was the first to enter. "What is that thing?" he asked upon seeing the empty tank at the end of the hold. "Think it's a life support system," Hawks replied as Sunset ventured inside to get a closer look. "High tech," he mentioned. "To haul around a new type of Namu, maybe?" he suggested unsurely. "A Namu," Endeavor repeated, remembering the last Namu he fought, when he almost lost his life. Hawks had his gloved right hand over his mouth and chin, trying to think of what could have been inside the life support tank. "They were transporting something valuable in here," he concluded, glancing off to the side. "The question is, what?" he wondered as up on the road above, fire trucks and police cars had arrived on the scene. "Well, let's find out," Sunset advised, walking forward to the surprise of the top two heroes in Japan. "How?" Endeavor asked curiously. The red and yellow-haired woman deactivated her magic in a flash of light, losing her wings, long ponytail, pony ears, and amber skin. "You're not planning to use that memory trick, are you?" Hawks guessed. "Couldn't even if I wanted to," Sunset responded, holding the pendant on her necklace. "My magic only works on beings that are conscious," she told the heroes. "Since the doubles are dissolved already, I can't do it," she explained, crouching down beside a puddle of the brown sludge. "So what are you planning?" Endeavor inquired. "I wouldn't worry about it, Endeavor," Hawks assured, getting his attention. "Knowing Angel, she's got this handled," he remarked confidently with his arms crossed. "Ahem," a voice fake coughed behind him. He turned around to see Sting Eucliffe there, scowling at him. Oh, you must be her husband, he realized with a laid-back grin. Nice to meet ya, he greeted. The white dragon slayer growled. Sting, come in here, his wife beckoned, enticing him to ignore the wing hero with a sigh as he walked inside. Moments later, he was sniffing at the life support tank. I get it, Endeavor realized, folding his arms over his chest. You're trying to track down whatever was in that life support system, he noted as he glanced over at Sting. Yeah, Sunset responded with a nod. But I really want to know why the League was doing this, she mentioned as she looked back at the sludge. Hard to figure that out without someone whose memory you can pick apart, Hawks bluntly pointed out, rubbing the back of his head. I actually had another idea, Sunset replied as she stood up, glancing back towards the opening of the truck's hold. The two heroes looked back and blinked in surprise. Having arrived was a slender woman with radiant pale skin and light freckles. She had long, platinum blonde hair that hung loosely and light blue eyes. For clothes, she had a white off-the-shoulder dress with a right knee-high slit, light grayish-blue leggings and white long sleeves which had certain symbols at the shoulder. Along her chest down to her waist were diamond-shaped ice crystals resembling the same symbols. Her translucent cape faded to blue at the bottom and was split in two, like fairy wings, draping over her. There were glittery sequins on her sleeves and tights, and she wore white open-toe ballet flats. Hello, Hawks greeted with a simple wave, evidently surprised. Glad you could make it, Elsa, Sunset said as the former queen entered the armored truck. Thanks, she replied in gratitude. Sorry I couldn't get here sooner, she apologized sheepishly. You're just in time, Sunset assured, leading her over to the sludge. Guys, this is Elsa, she introduced, gesturing towards the sorceress. Hi there, she greeted with a wave back to the top two heroes. They glanced at each other in confusion. What you planning to do, Angel? Hawks asked curiously, folding his arms over his chest. Elsa, Sunset said, prompting the former queen to speak. My power allows me to capture moments in time and possibly reanimate them, she explained to the pair of heroes. They looked over to Sunset in confusion. Basically, she's saying she could recreate a scene that tells us exactly what the League was up to, she told them. It's why I was hoping if they were doubles, there'd still be some of this muck around for us to use, she mentioned, gesturing towards the puddle of sludge. Use? Endeavor repeated as he tilted his head in confusion. With a deep breath, Elsa concentrated as she held out her hands towards the sludge. An icy blue aura enveloped them before she unleashed a flurry of snowflakes. They swirled around the sludge, also causing droplets of some other liquids to float up from all around the truck's hold. Whoa, Hawks uttered out as he and Endeavor widened their eyes in astonishment. After a few more moments, the particles of ice swirled around into four separate forming, creating lifelike ice statues. Sunset grinned. The statues were exact replicas of Spinner, Dabai, Compressed, and Twice. So this must be when they were about to depart, Endeavor concluded, putting his hand onto his chin curiously. And Bubegawara was probably telling his clones what they were doing, Hawks added, narrowing his eyes. Sunset nodded to Elsa, who nodded back. Here goes nothing, she said, closing her eyes and taking another deep breath, sticking out her hands. The statue's icy forms began to sparkle. All of a sudden, the one of Twice started to move. So my good copy chums, here's the plan, he exclaimed. The pro heroes blinked in surprise. They were actually seeing a moment in the past. Doc wants this thing moved to where it needs to go, the double quirk user explained to his colleagues. Route's already been put in the GPS, too, he mentioned assuredly, giving them a thumbs up. The three ice statues of the other villains turned around. You sure you're going to be able to drive this thing, Lizard? Dabai asked of his reptilian-like comrade. It's Spinner, he angrily corrected. And I'm the only one who can since you'll be guarding the cargo, he muttered in addition. What is this cargo we're carrying for the doctor, by the way? Compress wondered curiously as his body appeared to look towards the life support tank. Is it part of the plan? He inquired. The doc wouldn't say, Twice responded immediately. I think he might be trying to hide something from us, he mentioned in a serious tone. But I trust him completely, he declared with another thumbs up, having instantaneously switched to a more carefree tone. Elsa looked over at Sunset with a raised eyebrow afterwards, to which she just shrugged in response. Let's just get this over with, Dabai muttered as he started to walk away with Spinner and Compress. Good luck, my friends, Twice cried out in farewell as he saluted. I'm certain you'll be fine, he assured. Right before you'll all probably end up dead, he bluntly remarked. The ice statues all faded away into mist afterwards. Yeah, villains are weird, Sunset admitted with a shake of her head. So even the League was kept in the dark about their cargo, Hawks realized, glancing back outside. We should salvage the GPS to find out where they were heading, Endeavor advised, heading out the back of the truck to head to the front. Thanks for your help, Elsa, Sunset said in gratitude to the former queen as she walked over to her. You're welcome, she replied. I just wish I could do more, she admitted while holding onto her left arm. Sunset placed her hand onto her shoulder, causing her to perk up. You can, she assured with a grin. Let's get a search party together and find that cargo, she insisted to Hawks. Sting, you all set over there? She asked her husband, who was still crouched down by the tank. Bad news, milady, he responded to the group's surprise. I can't get a scent, he told them. What? Hawks uttered in surprise, widening his eyes. He knew a dragon slayer had a strong sense of smell, so for Sting to not pick up a trail. Sunset went over and squatted beside her husband. Whatever was in here must have lost its scent, he explained. By now, it's probably long gone, he pointed out. His wife put her hand onto her chin in thought. Then we're left with option B, she realized, standing up. We'll fan out around the perimeter and look for anything suspicious, she instructed to the others. Right, Elsa agreed with a nod. As the two women and Sting exited the armored truck, Hawks looked back at the life support tank. He was afraid to know what kind of cargo had exited the truck and ended up anywhere in the area. Within the forest above the mountain road, a certain figure was walking along a dirt path. It was a man of reasonable height with fair skin and thin, rectangular gray eyes with white pupils. He also had white hair that reaches just past his shoulders, worn swept back away from his face. Upon him was a large black mask that covered him from his chest to just above his nose, 4 extra pieces winding around the exposed skin of his face and around his head. 4 darker plates covered each side of his neck, lined with dark purple, and he had what appeared to be something similar to the flat muzzle of a gas mask over his mouth that was decorated with 7 gray studs, as well as a large purple and black cylinder protruding from each of his shoulder blades. Below this, he wore a full-body suit of a similar design, with plates of black covering his entire body, leaving only his fingers exposed. Huh, he breathed heavily as he trudged along the path, approaching the light emanating from the headlights of 2 vehicles ahead of him. In front of them were 3 figures. Sure took your time meeting back up with us. 9. One of the figures grumbled out of frustration in a gruff, male voice. He was an animalistic-looking man with traits of different animals. While he retained a humanoid figure, he had blue fur, a wolf-like head, hands resembling an eagle's talons, and a crocodile's tail. He wore a brown trench coat over a blue dress shirt and jeans fastened with a belt. He had his dark hair styled into dreadlocks. The one to his left was a young woman with fair skin, blue eyes that sloped inwards, and noticeably full, glossy lips. She also possessed straight, shiny red hair with chin-length bangs that partially obscured her right eye, the back part of which reached down to her thighs, while 2 front strands appeared long enough to reach past her feet. She wore it tied together at the ends down her back, the 2 longer strands left to fall down to her knees before looping back up behind her. She wore a pale purple blouse with frilled cuffs, the collar upturned, and a pearl string necklace of a similar color. Over this was a short, navy blue dress with a collar so low it dipped all the way down to her waist, as well as a thick brown belt that was fastened in 3 places around her waist. She also wore dark red gloves and frilled, thigh-high socks of a purple color, and a pair of black boots with knee-high protrusions worn over the top, 2 bands of red binding them to her calves around the back. Along with this, she sported a black choker with a small red circle in the center, as well as a black domino mask over her eyes. The last of the group was a tall, lanky man with pale orange eyes that were baggy and slanted forward and straight gray hair. His most distinguishing feature was his numerous burgundy-colored bandages, which wrapped around every part of his body except for his hands and eyes. Over his bandages, he wore a dark gray combat vest, light gray skin-tight pants with beige knee guards, and a set of black fingerless gloves. He also wore gray dress shoes with dark detailing, along with a brown garter belt holding numerous pouches, held up by a belt around his waist. A small sword was being carried upon his left shoulder. "It was worth the wait," the suited man responded, turning around to look down at the vast city that lied before them. "The experiment was a success," he told his comrades. They all grinned, glad to hear the news. Meanwhile, the man known as Nine continued to look down at the city as his eyes glowed a bright yellow. The wind rushed by his silvery white hair. The world has become a superhuman society, with about 80% of the population possessing some kind of uncanny ability. My name is Izuku Midoriya, and I was born quirkless. But my life completely changed when I met the #1 pro, All Might. He transferred his quirk, one for all, to me. After that, I enrolled at Ua High, the prestigious school known for producing first-class heroes. I worked hard, always running toward my dreams. And so, it continues. The story of how I became the world's greatest hero, Part I. The sun shined brightly over a large island out in the middle of the ocean. Many people were gathered at the beach, enjoying the beautiful day. Sitting up at the lifeguard station was Mizo Shoji, who formed multiple eyes and ears at the tips of his tentacles to watch out for any issues that could potentially arise. Meanwhile, there seemed to be a problem occurring at the local beachside building. "Come hang out with us, gorgeous," one man requested as he and his friend had approached 2 women, who obviously looked uncomfortable. "No thanks," one of them responded as she turned away. "Yeah, we don't need creeps like you around to have a good time," the other muttered out, crossing her arms. "Aw, come on," the 2 men pleaded simultaneously as they approached the pair. "Let's have some F." "Ah," they yelped as they suddenly fell over onto their faces, having unknowingly stepped on a pair of sticky purple balls that stuck to their feet. "Huh?" both women uttered in confusion, wondering who had done that. "Some guys are just total creeps, aren't they?" A nasally voice gasped from behind, catching their attentions as they turned around. Standing there was Minoru Mainta, dressed in his costume as he flipped a sticky ball in his right hand. "Good thing you've got a classy dude like me here," he remarked, flashing a toothy grin. Both women smiled as they jogged over and passed by him. "Thank you so much," they exclaimed in gratitude. Minoru blinked in confusion, glancing back to see that they were mistakenly thanking Mashirao Ajiro, who was also in his costume. No, it wasn't me," he stuttered out while blushing, frantically waving his hands. "Hey," Minoru yelled, trying to get the attention of the beachgoers. "It was me. I'm the one who stopped those creeps," he cried out to no avail. Apparently, his short stature wasn't too noticeable. "Wah!" a little boy screamed from the ocean, splashing wildly as the current was pulling him towards the rocks nearby. "Someone help my baby!" his mother screamed from the beach. Hopping by her was Tsuyu Asui, who dove into the water and quickly swam towards where the little boy was. She shot out her long tongue from her mouth, having it wrap around his torso before lifting him up out of the water. "Ararara!" a sugar-charged Rikido Sato roared as he hurried over to the scene in a boat, rowing rapidly. As he arrived, Tsuyu lowered the little boy into his arms. "Hey kid," he greeted, catching his attention as he looked to see the exhausted look on the Sugar Rush quirk user's face. "You good?" he asked tiredly. "Wah!" the little boy screamed in fright. What's wrong?" Rikito asked with a stutter. Tsuyu had poked out her head from the water to witness the scene. "I think you scared him, Ribbit," she bluntly pointed out with a croak as a bead of sweat rolled down her head. Moments after the child was reunited with his mother at the shore, several strands of tape were being shot out and tied together between two wood poles by Hantasiro, spelling out the kanji for keep away. "Back, everyone, back!" Dark Shadow yelled to the murmuring crowd on the scene, protruding from Fumikage Takoyami as he and Hanta were tasked with blocking off the now dangerous area of the beach. All of a sudden, they felt the ground rumble as a shadow started to cast over them. They looked back and gasped to see a large wall of ice that had formed around the rocks, blocking them off entirely. Hopping down from it and landing between Hanta and Fumikage was Alice Fullbuster, who held out her hands to the crowd. "We apologize for the inconvenience," she said. "But we'd all like to prioritize your safety," she told the beachgoers. They all stared back at her, seemingly dumbfounded. "What's wrong?" the ice and water mage asked. Silver ice?" Fumikage uttered, looking away with a blush across his face, as was Hanta. She turned back to her classmates. "Your costume," the bird-headed teen said. Blinking in confusion, Alice looked down and gasped. Her white coat and gray pants had been unwittingly discarded, leaving her in just her black sports bra and underwear. She stammered, trying to find a way to steer the predicament so that the crowd didn't think she was being creepy. "Does anyone want to take some swimming lessons?" she offered with a stutter. For a moment, no one responded. She grimaced, thinking she had freaked out the crowd. "I wanna," one little boy cried out. "Me too," a girl exclaimed as she jogged forward. About a half-dozen kids ran over to Alice. "Please teach us, Miss Ice Lady," another boy requested. With a sigh of relief, the onyx-haired girl led them towards the water. "Phew," Hanta exhaled, relieved as well. "That could have gotten way out of hand," he remarked with a roll of his eyes. "Indeed," Fumikage agreed as Dark Shadow retracted back into his body. As the crowd was dispersing, watching from afar were Shoto Todoroki and Rachel Hagen. "Is it really okay for them to be showing off their powers like that?" the former of the two asked as they were stationed nearby the food stands at the beach. "Oh, lighten up, Shoto," Rachel muttered in response. "We might as well show everyone just how capable we are so they don't have to worry," she pointed out to him. "Hey, Shoto," a voice called out, catching their attentions as they saw one of the vendors approach them with an empty ice chest. "Can you please give me some ice?" he asked of him. "I just ran out," he sheepishly admitted. In just an instant, the red and white-haired teen formed a giant shard of ice in front of himself. It was twice as tall as he was, much to the bearded vendor's shock. "Will this do?" he inquired. "Oh, of course," the vendor stuttered out in reply, evidently thankful for the quick supply. Rachel sighed with a grin. "You're such a hypocrite, Shoto," she remarked, bringing forth a sword in a flash of golden light. With a few quick slashes to the ice shard, it broke down into smaller pieces that filled up the ice chest. "Whoa, thanks, Scarlet Knight," the vendor exclaimed in gratitude. She smiled back, letting her weapon disappear in another flash. From afar at a grassy ledge, a pair of kids were watching the class, one of students working hard to keep the beach safe and help out whenever needed. One was a young boy with brown eyes, curly, light brown hair, and a small patch of freckles in the middle of his face. He wore a pair of blue overalls with dark blue straps over a white t-shirt, accompanied by light blue sandals. He also carried a small, yellow messenger bag that has an oddly shaped pin fastened onto the strap. Additionally, he sported a bracelet with a floral charm along with a large sun hat, which had a blue band on the crown and a light blue stripe on the rim. As he was sitting down and observing the aspiring heroes, standing beside him was a small girl with dark brown eyes, straight brown hair styled into pigtails with dark pink bubble-shaped bands, and a small patch of freckles in the middle of her face. She wore a pink dress with dark pink overall straps and buttons over a black tank top, and white sandals with a pink stripe wrapped around the sole, and dark pink flower decorations at the sides. On her left wrist was a bracelet with a floral charm, identical to the one the young boy beside her had. She also wore a large sun hat with a dark pink scarf and bow at the crown and a light pink stripe at the rim. There are so many heroes, the little boy noted in awe, smiling at the sight of the students at the beach. HMPH. The girl next to him huffed disdainfully. She seemed annoyed that he appeared to like the aspiring heroes so much. Elsewhere on the island was a small, two-story building with a sign out front that read Iogi Heights above another signboard that read Yua High School won an agency. Inside, a phone rang. Yua Hero Agency. Mina Ishido's voice echoed as she picked up the phone inside, being seated in front of a computer monitor. She listened to the caller for a moment. "Sure, I'll send someone right away," she promised, putting the phone down onto its stand before getting onto her feet. "Kaminari," she called out into the room. "Head to the West District," she instructed to him. "Mr. Matsuda's battery's dead," she mentioned. "Geez, again?" Denki Kaminari complained, pushing his chair back so he could get up from his seat. "Why can't the old man buy a new one already?" he grumbled in wonder. "Go get him, charge a bolt!" Mina cheered with a pump of her right fist. "Go, go!" the others in the room repeated as they pumped up their own fists. "I'm on it," Denki responded, now enthusiastic about going thanks to the supportive cheers of his classmates. The room they were in was basically a spacious computer lounge, with enough devices for each student of class wanted to utilize. Amongst those in the room was Yuga Aoyama, who had just answered a call from his phone. "Why, you have reached Yua Hero Agency," he said, "where we strive to solve all your problems with a sparkle tilde," he added with a wink. "You found the lost dog?" Toru Hagakure asked as she held onto her phone in her gloved left hand. "Sure did," Koji Koda's voice answered from the other end of the communication line. He was elsewhere on the island, holding an excited Bozran puppy while talking into his smartphone. "And don't worry, he's doing just fine," he assured as the puppy licked his face happily. "Good work," Toru responded over the phone. "Now all that's left is a missing parrot," she reported to him. "Hey guys," Rhea Tennyson's echoed over the speaker of Kyoka Jiro's phone. "I found that parrot that went missing. Oh," she yelped in pain to everyone's surprise. "I'm gonna meet up with Anima to get this guy back home," she promised. "Copy that, Rainbow Ray," the earphone jack quirk user replied, setting the receiver down. Meanwhile, Ochako Uraraka had just picked up her phone upon getting another call. "Please, it's my little brother," a little girl's voice pleaded over the line. "I can't find him anywhere," she pointed out desperately. "Stay calm, okay?" Ochako requested in an assuring tone, understanding the situation. "We can help you," she promised. In the meantime, Momo Yayurazu had taken a call nearby. "No, really, it's no trouble at all," she assured to who she was speaking with. "Of course," she responded with a nod after a moment of listening. She then set her phone down. "Hey, do you mind?" she inquired of the person sitting across from her, being none other than Tenya Ada. "It sounds like poor Granny Sato threw out her back," she told him. "Right, I'm on it," he responded quickly as he stood up from his seat. "Fear not, Granny, I'm on the way," he declared, putting his helmet on over his head. "Lost child in the shopping center," Ochako called out, looking around the area. "Is there anyone available to come with me?" she asked, smiling as she noticed a few familiar faces lounging about in the common area. "Hard pass," Katsuki Bakugo bluntly replied, lying on his back as he was reading an island guidebook in front of the table. "Come on," Ochako yelled in frustration. "Yeah, obviously you're real busy, Bakugo," Ijiro Kirishima sarcastically noted as he was seated nearby his usually explosive friend. "Count me in," he said to Ochako, standing up and turning to face her. "Let's find this kid," he stated excitedly. "Yeah, and how's your dumb quirk help gonna find anything?" Katsuki inquired rhetorically as he peeked over from reading his guidebook. Ijiro grimaced. Despite his power's usefulness, tracking wasn't one of its strong suits. "We've got a missing kid," Kyoka guessed as she stood up from her seat. "Okay," she said, twirling his left ear jack in her hand. "Sounds like I'm up," she concluded based on the information of the mission. "You mean sounds like we're up," another voice corrected, catching her attention as she looked over to see Natalie Dragneel stand up from her seat. "It's finally time to start some hero work today," she exclaimed, punching her left hand excitedly. "I'm all fired up," she declared. "I'm free," Izuku Midoriya chimed in, catching their attentions as the three girls turned to see him stand up from his seat. "I can help look, too," he assured to them. Moments later, he was outside, holding a life preserver around his waist. One for all, full cowling. He began inwardly as red lines of energy flowed up his body, making it shine a little 8%. He exclaimed through his thoughts. Sparks of green electricity emanated all around him. "Hero Agency," Ochako started to say from behind, as she touched Kyoka and Natalie with her fingertips, making them lighter as they grabbed onto the life preserver to keep themselves from floating away. "Members of Class 1A," the other two girls continued as Ochako tapped her padded fingers against each other to make herself float, grabbing the part of the preserver between her classmates. "Heading out," the four of them exclaimed. Izuku dashed off, running speedily down the streets with his three female passengers. He glanced back to see the bright smile on his girlfriend's face, enjoying the ride she and the others were on. They raced through the neighborhood and by fields of flowers before reaching the main road, where Izuku proceeded to leap over the railing towards the vast farmland below stretching out towards the main city. There are 24 enrolled in Class 1A of UA High School's Hero course, and we've been through a lot together. Now, we're here on Nabu Island, a peaceful place far from mainland Japan. All of us have our provisional licenses, but it's still unusual for a group of students to be running a hero agency by themselves, even if it is just temporary. So, why did our teachers send us here? Flashback. "You want to use hero course students?" Principal Nezu asked, seated on a couch in an office lounge. "In places where pros aren't available?" he continued to question. "So they'd all be working as heroes without adult supervision," All Might noted, standing off to the side. He and the principal were speaking with Yokimaru Mira, who was seated at the opposite side of the table. "That's right," he responded tiredly. "We want to prepare the next generation of heroes as soon as possible by giving them the chance to work in the field," he explained. "Rest assured, they won't be working in critical position such as dealing with villains, but they'll be gaining a great amount of experience," he mentioned to them. "Sounds like a good idea to me," another voice mentioned from afar, catching their attentions as they looked to see Ben Tennyson standing nearby in the corner. "I agree," Nezu concurred with a nod. "If we're to cultivate the next generation to be the best they can be, it'll be good for them to take this opportunity," he told those in the room. "You have our word on that," Yokimaru promised. Meanwhile, All Might glanced down in thought. He wondered if this was really okay. Moments after the meeting had ended, he stood outside the office lounge with Ben. "Didn't expect to see you here," he pointed out to the Omni Force leader, getting his attention. "Stark giving you any trouble?" he inquired. "Ha," Ben laughed. "Still hung up on that move, huh?" he guessed, causing the former pro hero to roll his eyes in frustration. "Had to come by when I heard about the commission's plan for the students," he told him. "While they're off on their own, what are you guys gonna do?" he wondered. All Might blinked in surprise. That was a good question. If the students were off doing their own work, what were the teachers supposed to do? "Did you have something in mind?" he guessed out of curiosity. Ben then pulled out his MPG, pressing the center icon with his thumb. A green hologram then projected out from it, showing off an expansive list. Your successor's been doing a lot in terms of finding new recruits in new worlds, the Omni Force leader noted. He even left behind us, so we could keep in touch with some of them, he mentioned with a grin. Incredible, All Might uttered out in amazement. He knew Izuku was already doing his best in the hero course, but having done as much as he had with the Omni Force in only a few short months. Proud didn't even begin to describe how the former pro felt about his successor in that moment. We were thinking he could have these recruits invited here for the month. The kids are off on the project, Ben told him, getting his attention. You guys could help show them the ropes and see what they're made of, he suggested. All Might hummed in thought, putting his hand onto his chin. That does sound like a good idea, he admitted as he grinned. Meanwhile, the Hero Work Recommendation Project, Shota Aizawa said from within the classroom of Class 1A, displaying a topographical image of an island on the interactive chalkboard. You'll be stationed here, he told the class. On Nabu Island in southern Japan, he added, walking over to the podium. Seems their previous hero in residence got old and retired, he mentioned. So the lucky people of Nabu Island will have to depend on you until a permanent successor arrives, he explained. We're really doing real hero work? Most of the students in the class exclaimed out of excitement. Many of them began shouting about how happy they were with the news. After all that had gone down in their first year as students, they were finally being put to the test in the actual field. I'm all fired up, Natalie roared as she bounced up from her seat. Among those who didn't seem excited were Katsuki and Izuku. They looked rather serious. This isn't an internship, or a work study, the latter of the two realized inwardly. We're talking about the real thing, he noted to himself. Becoming a hero has been my dream since I was little, he remembered vividly, knowing full well of the hardships he had gone through as a once quirkless kid. And now, it's happening, he said through his thoughts, ignoring all the chatter around him. I wasn't done talking yet, Shota interjected as his black hair started sticking up wildly. Quiet down, he ordered with his eyes flashing a bright red. Everyone immediately stopped talking and sat back down in their seats. Better, their teacher said, letting his hair fall back down. While you're there, you'll be completely on your own, he pointed out to the students. No teachers to help you or pros to back you up, he added. You're responsible for everything that happens, good or bad, he told them seriously. Keep that in mind, he advised as everyone carefully listened, giving off determined looks. And behave as heroes should at all times, he mentioned. Understood? He asked of his students. Yes, sir, they all responded. Later that day, Izuku had just set his backpack onto his back, ready to depart the classroom and head back to the dorms. Midoriya, Shota's voice said, catching his attention as he turned to see his unkempt teacher approach him. Oh, Mr. Aizawa, he greeted. Is there something wrong? He asked in concern. It's nothing serious, his teacher assured, holding up his right hand. But while you and the class are gone, Yua is going to be taking in potential Omni Force recruits and train them, he explained. Izuku gasped in surprise. Really? He exclaimed. That's a great idea, he pointed out excitedly. Thing is, we're going to need all the information we can get on them so that the training is effective, his teacher mentioned, crossing his arms over his chest. If it's not too much trouble, I can get copies of all my notes by tomorrow, Izuku quickly interjected, balling his fists with excitement. I'm sure you and the teachers will love getting to know everyone I've met, he added before hurrying off. Shota blinked in surprise, but then grinned. As troublesome as Izuku could be, he had his bright spots. End flashback. Elsewhere on the island, Fumikage and Rhea were flying about side by side, as the former was in the air thanks to Dark Shadow, who was wrapped underneath his cloak as it spread its hands out like wings. The bird-headed teen was relaying a message over his cell phone, flying down with the half-rainbow-haired girl. Having received the call was Mashirao, who ran off from his position at the beachfront to rendezvous with them. At the beach itself, Suyu and Alice were helping a group of kids learn how to swim, with the two students showing them how to perform the backstroke. To their delight, the children all seemed to get the hang of it right away. Meanwhile, Izuku and the others were looking throughout the city for the lost boy they had been tasked with finding. They asked a few people if he was around the area, while also greeting the locals before hurrying off to the next area. Out on the mountain road, several vehicles were stopped as the remnants of a rock slide blocked off the path ahead. Fortunately, Yuga, Mina, and Rachel were there. The former of the group fired off a sparkling blue laser from his belt, while the pink-skinned girl beside him stuck her hands out together in the form of a nozzle before spraying out a colorless acid. Both attacks struck the debris, followed by Rachel requipping into her Heaven's Wheel armor in a flash of light. She summoned forth many blades, lunging forward and slashing at the rocks in a fierce explosion. When the smoke cleared, it revealed that the debris had been completely obliterated. The people cheered for the three students who helped them, while they turned back and posed for their new fans. Everyone seemed to be hard at work on the island in some way, shape, or form. Tenya was fulfilling his duty of carrying an old woman speedily to the hospital, waving to people along his route. At the harbor, Ijiro was helping a worker fasten the ropes holding down a truckload of supplies upon a vehicle. As the man thanked him, he showed off his hardening in response. However, the baby that the man's wife was holding in a knapsack on her back started to cry at the sight of Ijiro's hardened appearance. His mother smiled reassuringly, while the student panicked, flailing his arms as he tried to think of a way to console the child. Out in the fields, Denki was charging up a battery connected to a harvester. As the driver could hear the engine start to rev, he looked back towards the student and flashed him a thumbs up, to which he responded with his own as sparks of electricity flew about while he grinned. Meanwhile, Momo had a multicolored light appear upon her forearm arm before she pulled out a wrench from it. She was repairing a moped outside of a small home. Coming outside of the house was an old woman who carrying an offering of refreshments on a tray for the hard-working young woman. With her earphone jacks plugged into the sidewalk, Kyoka carefully listened with her hands on her headphones to hear if she could pinpoint the missing child they needed to find. Upon finally detecting something, she pointed off to her right. With sparks of green lightning crackling around his body, Izuku took off in that direction. His girlfriend quickly followed, with Ochako and Kyoka jogging after them after the latter removed her jacks from the ground. Atop the tall hill was a small playground. Walking about there was the sun hat-wearing boy who had been viewing the heroes at the beach earlier. He appeared to be looking around for something. "Hi," a voice called out, catching his attention as he turned around. Coming up the hill and arriving in a single bound was Izuku. The boy stared ahead in amazement. "Are you Katsuma Shimano?" the student asked. The little boy held onto the strap of his bag as he approached. "You got separated from your big sister, right?" he inquired. "Here," he offered, holding out his right hand to the boy. "Come with me," he beckoned assuredly. The little boy seemed ready to take his hand. "There you are," the pigtailed girl yelled as she was sliding down the metal slide. "It's about time," she complained as she reached the end. "Sis," the little boy exclaimed in surprise, seeing her hop to her feet and start pointing accusingly at the freckled teen. "What's your name, you slowpoke?" she questioned demandingly as he stumbled back. "Hi, my name's Deku," he quickly introduced, evidently surprised by the little girl's sudden appearance. "And you are?" he asked back unsurely. She put her hands at her hips as she puffed out her cheeks in frustration. "I'm Mihoro, Katsuma's older sister," she responded, still fuming. "Oh, then I guess you found him before I even got here, huh?" Izuku assumed. "Ha, ha," he sheepishly chuckled. "Lucky," he commented. At that moment, Natalie arrived atop the hill, looking ahead at the scene in complete confusion. "You explain yourself," Mihoro demanded. "You were looking for him for over an hour," she pointed out, holding up a smartphone with a stopwatch upon it, showing that much time had indeed passed. Natalie blinked. Why did the pigtailed girl feel the need to keep track of time? What took you so long? She asked angrily. Yua High is so famous, and this is all they have to offer. She inquired as she pointed accusingly at Izuku again. If they're gonna send us losers like you, then we'd be better off with that geezer we had before. She pointed out in frustration as she stomped towards the student, causing him to fall onto his rear end. A drop of sweat rolled down his head, astonished from how enraged the girl was. Hey, whoa, Natalie chimed in, catching their attentions as they looked to see her jog over. We're sorry we couldn't find him as fast, she apologized. Even with my sense of smell and Kyoka's hearing, we weren't exactly able to pick up on your little brother right away, she explained to Mihoro. HMPH, she scoffed, turning away. And who are you supposed to be? She asked almost uncaringly. My name's Natalie, the Dragon Slayer introduced. But you can call me Salamander, she insisted with a giggle. Mihoro scoffed, keeping herself turned away to her surprise. I'm sorry, Izuku apologized. Well, what did they expect? The little girl muttered out rhetorically. You are just high schoolers, she pointed out. Natalie felt her eyes twitch. We really are sorry. Izuku apologized again with a stutter as he rubbed the back of his head, much to his girlfriend's chagrin. In spite of their apparent tardiness to find Katsuma, they did do some good. At least we tried looking for him, she complained to the pigtailed girl as she leaned herself closer with her hands at her hips. Can't you be thankful for that? She inquired, arching an eyebrow. Unfortunately, Mihoro didn't seem to be anywhere near gracious. The only way I'd ever thank you is if you'd actually do your job, she remarked. Now Natalie was starting to get mad. Izuku noticed and grimaced. And to make matters worse. Wait a second, his girlfriend uttered out, blinking in confusion as she leaned closer to Mihoro and started sniffing at her. Hey, she stuttered, perplexed as to what she was doing. Natalie, her boyfriend uttered out as he blinked. She then trotted over to Katsuma and sniffed at him as he clutched the strap of his bag nervously. After a moment, she gasped. Why, you little, she growled, turning around towards Mihoro with an angered scowl. You were with him the whole time, she concluded. The pigtailed girl gasped. Wha, really? Izuku guessed in surprise as he got back onto his feet. His girlfriend responded with a nod. If Katsuma was really missing for over an hour, he wouldn't have much of a whiff of her scent on him, she explained. But he still has yours, she noted, pointing at Mihoro accusingly. And you better not lie, because my nose knows more than you think, she added, narrowing her eyes onto the little girl. She gulped. Well, she stuttered out, trying to regain herself. You still took too long looking for him, she accused with her hands at her hips. He was never lost, you brat, Natalie shouted back. The two gritted their teeth and glared daggers at each other, growling all the while. Izuku and Katsuma stared on at them completely dumbfounded. The former knew his girlfriend wouldn't let up over this whole ordeal, letting out a deep sigh. There they are, Ochako's voice cried out as she and Kyoka were running up the steps. Mihoro took notice and stood up straight, folding her arms over her chest. So you think you can do your job properly next time, Deku? Salamander? She asked of the couple before her. Natalie was seething, grinding her teeth. Yeah, Izuku chimed in assuredly, definitely caught off guard by all that he had just learned. We'll try to be a little bit faster, he promised as he walked over and put his hand onto his girlfriend's shoulder, enticing her to calm down, though she still looked frustrated. Let's go, Katsuma, Mihoro beckoned as she smugly trotted by the two students. Oh, her brother uttered. K, he said, jogging after her, but not before stopping beside Izuku and Natalie. He tried to say, getting their attentions as they looked to see him fidgeting nervously, as he couldn't bring himself to make eye contact with them. Thanks for your help, he told them out of gratitude. Both aspiring heroes were somewhat surprised. Wasn't this all just a ploy? You don't need to thank them for anything, Mihoro chimed in. grabbing her brother's right hand and hurrying off with him, passing by the arriving Ochako and Kyoka along the way. Hey, what's going on with those two? The zero-gravity quirk user asked as she approached the couple alongside the punk rock girl. Why were you apologizing? Kyoka questioned on, having overheard the conversation. After a moment, Izuku grinned. Apparently, we took too long to find him, so his sister yelled at us, he explained in response. Huh? Kyoka uttered with a tilt of her head and an arched eyebrow. That's ridiculous, she commented. Still, I'm glad, Izuku admitted to the girl's confusion as they blinked. About what? Kyoka inquired. Katsuma's safe, he replied with a bright grin on his face. And that's all that really matters, you know? He implored to his friends. Kyoka seemed somewhat baffled by that answer, rubbing the back of her head. However, Ochako smiled. You know, it's amazing just how Deku you can be sometimes, she pointed out to the freckled teen. Huh? He uttered in confusion. I don't understand, he said. Ochako flashed him a thumbs up and a wink. I'm saying that you're a hero, through and through, she exclaimed in a complimentary tone. At that, Natalie also smiled. And that's why you're my boyfriend, through and through, she mentioned, getting his attention as she grabbed him by his right arm. She then leaned up and planted a soft, sweet kiss onto his cheek. Ah, he yelped in surprise as his face turned entirely red. Natalie, he stammered as she broke away from him. I thought, we talked about that, he pointed out, looking evidently embarrassed. Kyoka chuckled. The whole PDA thing, she guessed, putting her hands at her hips. Natalie sighed. Mr. Aizawa didn't have to call us out like that, she grumbled in recollection. Flashback. Now can anyone tell me what PDA stands for? Shota asked the class a few days after the Hero Work Recommendation Project announcement. That stands for Public Displays of Affection, right? Mushrow guessed, having raised his right hand. Correct, Shota responded with a nod. As I'm sure most of you would guess, heroes do have personal lives outside of their work, he told the class. And I'm aware that a few of you are in relationships in this class, he mentioned. Is he calling us out? Rachel wondered quietly to her girlfriend from the back of the room, to which she responded with a quick shush. Midori, Dragneel, Shota called out, catching their attentions. I'd like for you two especially to keep the PDA down to a minimum while on the island, he insisted of them. You may be by yourselves on the island, but that doesn't mean you can go around however you want, he pointed out. Izuku's face was beet red. He could hear the snickers of his classmates as he held his head in his arms to block his blush from being seen. Natalie seemed somewhat annoyed about the remarks, thinking they should have been directed towards more than just her and her boyfriend. End flashback. Well, as long as we're not on duty, it's fine, the Dragon Slayer assured to Izuku, causing him to perk up. Now let's hurry back, she insisted before running off. Ha, Kyoka chuckled. It's amazing to see just how dedicated Nat is, she pointed out as she looked to see her hop down the hill hurriedly. Sometimes, I wonder just how boring things would get without her around, she admitted sheepishly. I know what you mean, Izuku replied with a nod. She's always so upbeat, he commented. Yeah, Ochako agreed, though she unconsciously balled her fists. Something familiar was bubbling up inside of her, but she kept it down. The three of them went off after their friend, ready to head back to their temporary agency. Those wannabes were useless, just like I thought, Mahoro noted from the sidewalk by a small corner store as she and her brother were walking by, holding onto a popsicle and an ice cream cone respectively. If they can't hack it on a little island like this where there's basically no crime, what good are they? She wondered as Katsuma licked the vanilla soft serve on his cone. Yua must have scraped from the bottom of the barrel when they were deciding who to send out here, she grumbled. Her little brother turned to look at her. They looked for me when you told them I was missing though, he pointed out. That boy who found me was so nice, he mentioned in remembrance. Just like a hero would be, he added. His sister was surprised. She huffed, puffing out her cheeks in frustration. I guess I'll have to show you the truth about this so-called hero, she inwardly realized before chomping off a piece of her blue popsicle, which she instantly regretted. She stopped as a chill went up her spine from how cold the icy treat was. You okay? Katsuma asked worriedly upon noticing. X. Snowflakes lightly fell over Yua High as All Might looked out the window from the administration offices. He wondered how the Class 1 students were doing on their assignment at Nabu Island. In fact, he was somewhat worried. I wouldn't be too concerned, Shota suddenly said, catching his attention. The worst of crimes ever committed on the island was just petty theft, he pointed out, having noticed the worry in the former hero's expression. I'm sure the students'll do just fine, he assured to him. Ha, he chuckled. I suppose you're right, he concluded. He knew the students were certainly capable of handling themselves. They had already gone through a lot through their first year. But there was still this underlying feeling he had of something lurking in the darkness. There was a knock at the door. The two teachers inside turned to see it slide open. Hello, a voice greeted. All Might cracked a grin. Standing at the doorway was none other than the long, red-haired Chariot du Nord, dressed in a white stylized tailcoat vest with long sleeves secured by 4 blue buttons holding everything together. It didn't cover her armpits, clavicles, cleavage, and navel, giving it a similar appearance to a corset or vest. She also had a blue skirt, a brown body belt with a golden ring-shaped buckle, blue thigh-high stockings that appeared to be folded over themselves, white boots with a diamond-like shape in the tip, 2 parallel buttons right under it, along with a red tip and heels, a white witch hat with a blue hat band, and a red and blue diamond/spade-like symbol with a golden 4-pointed star in the middle, and also a red cape with a brown strap and golden buttons. Oh, du Nord, Shota greeted with a simple wave. Hi there, Shota, she exclaimed while smiling brightly. I hope Akko and Diana haven't been troubling you too much, she mentioned as she put her hands together behind her back. Ha, the Erasure hero laughed. Believe me, with the group I've got, they're the least of my worries, he remarked before leaving the office space. That left Chariot to walk over to All Might. Congratulations on the official membership, he complimented upon standing up. The Omni Force is lucky to have someone like you on board, he mentioned, taking her right hand into his own and shaking it firmly. Thank you, Toshinori, she replied in gratitude. Honestly, I never thought we'd get to meet each other again, she confessed graciously. I'm glad I got to meet your successor, she added with a bright smile. Me too, All Might agreed. Had he not met Izuku, this reunion may have never happened. So what are you doing here, Chariot? He asked out of curiosity. Well, aside from wanting to check in on Akko and Diana's progress, she began in response. I was wondering if you could tell us anything about the League's recent move, she said, making him blink in surprise. Oh, that Chase Endeavor was involved in, he recalled, putting his hand onto his chin. Wasn't Sunset there as well? He inquired. She's part of the investigation, but she wanted me to ask if you had any idea what the League was up to, Chariot told him in reply. He glanced off to the side and thought, putting his hand onto his chin. From what I recall, the last big move the League made was their assault on the convoy carrying the boss of the Shy Hasakai, he explained. They apparently took hold of some valuable items he had, or so it's been rumored. He remembered, closing his eyes for a moment. Anything else? Chariot asked with a tilt of her head. All Might took another second to think, recalling a conversation he had with his former mentor, Gran Tuno. Most recently, the police apprehended Kurogiri, the League's warping villain, he said as a reply. However, they also discovered another underling that served for all for one, he mentioned grimly. My old teacher said he was a walking disaster, he added. Whatever the League's up to, I'm glad that the Omni Force is helping the pros deal with it, he said. Chariot smiled. It was really good to see you, Toshinori, she noted, embracing him in a warm hug. He blinked in surprise before letting off a grin, returning the kind gesture. You too, Chariot, he replied. X. Back at Iogi Heights on Nabu Island, the 24 students were all lounging about after a hard day's worth of work, now wearing casual clothes or their P uniforms. I'm exhausted, Rikito complained, leaning his head back in his chair. Yeah, ditto, Rhea agreed as she was resting her head against a table. Practically everyone in the room was spent. We've gone plus ultra beyond what's allowed by the Labor Standards Act, Denki remarked bluntly. Hey, how about fewer small jobs? Hanta suggested with a wave of his right hand towards Tenya and Momo. No can do, the class representative answered after sipping his drink and writing something down on a pad of paper. All jobs are equally vital, he stated firmly. The class deputy then stood up after setting down her purple beverage. It may be true that we came here as heroes, she began to her classmates. But remember, we're still just students, she pointed out. We have to work hard and prove ourselves to earn the islanders' trust, she told them as they listened intently. Hey, does that go for all of us? Minoru suddenly asked as he raised his right hand, followed by letting off a devious grin. 'Cause I know someone who hasn't done anything since we got here, he noted, pointing towards Katsuki, who was sitting at a table in a nearby room with Ijiro and Rachel. Well, somebody's gotta stay behind and watch the office, moron, the explosive teen argued. What are you gonna do if a villain shows up while all you geniuses are out doing stupid crap? He inquired sarcastically. Huh, he exclaimed for emphasis, flashing a thumbs down. Oh, come on. There aren't any villains on this island, Ijiro assured as he rested his head against the table. Let's hope you didn't jinx it, Rachel remarked with a smirk as she put her head in her hands. Ah, Natalie yawned, leaning against her boyfriend as he shivered in surprise. Well, at least we got this downtime, right, Deku? She asked, looking up at him sweetly. He nervously glanced over to her. Aside from her pea sweatpants and shoes, she wore a bright orange tank top with a yellow flame at the chest that had the red word hot imprinted into it. He gulped. Why, yeah, he stuttered out in agreement, glancing away as his cheeks burned a bright red. Midoriya, I hope you and Dragneel are behaving yourselves, Tenya remarked sternly upon noticing. The freckled teen was caught completely off guard as his entire face went red. I, he stammered, unable to respond as he was too embarrassed. Natalie puffed out her cheeks in frustration. Oh, lighten up, Ida, Mina chimed in before the Dragon Slayer could speak up. Let those two have their time together while off the job, she insisted. Yeah, no need to be so hard on them, Toru commented. Besides, doesn't our class have another couple that's been together way longer? Minoru questioned rhetorically, glancing over to the side again. Maybe we ought to focus on keeping them out of trouble, he suggested cheekily. To which Rachel responded by summoning forth a kunai in a flash of light and flinging it. Ah! The lecherous student yelped as the kunai pierced into his chair just inches away from his crotch. Rachel chuckled smugly, crossing her arms over her chest. Her girlfriend let out a sigh, having suspected she would react that way. At that moment, everyone heard the door open. Sorry for barging in, a voice apologized, catching their attentions as they turned to the doorway. Standing there was a spectacled, middle-aged man amongst a group of the islanders. The students had been helping today. Mr. Mayor, Tenya exclaimed in surprise. It was so sweet of you to carry Granny to the hospital earlier, one woman noted as Tenya approached, taking the glass-covered tray of food from her. Thank you, she said in gratitude to Momo as she had come over. And thank you for fixing that old bike of mine, the old woman added graciously to her. And our battery, Mr. Matsuda chimed in. And for keeping the beach safe, too, the two girls from earlier in the day mentioned as they passed by. All of them were carrying food, whether it was in coolers or on trays. Freshest fish on the island, right here, one man added as he carried in two big plates. A few moments later, Both tables were set entirely with a buffet of food, and it was enormous. Just a little something to show you how grateful we are that you're helping us, the old woman pointed out to the 24 students. All right, let's dig in. Most of them exclaimed excitedly, readying for a wholesome and big dinner. We're heroes, Tenya suddenly shouted, waving his arms crazily to his classmates. People, show some restraint, he implored of them. About a minute later, he was outside with Momo to send the islanders on their way. Thank you for your hospitality, the class deputy said in gratitude to them. Please, the mayor pleaded, considering how hard you've been working. It's the least we could do, he pointed out. And I'm sure we can continue to count on you, the old woman added confidently. Both Tenya and Momo shook, humbled by the kind words of the islanders. Of course, the latter replied in assurance. Absolutely, the class representative agreed. We'll keep doing our best, he promised firmly. A while later, practically every item of food on the buffet table had been eaten. That was delicious. Most of class 1 had exclaimed after finishing their hearty meal. Oh, wow, man, I'm so full, Izuku said, wrapping his arms around his stomach as a wholesome smile was on his face. Me too, Natalie chimed in, having her own wide smile as she sat beside her boyfriend on the sofa alongside Mizo. You could really feel the love they put into their cooking, he pointed out with crossed arms. Moments like these remind me why I wanted to become a hero. Suyu chimed in happily. Yeah, Ochako wholeheartedly agreed. Ah, Natalie yawned again before she proceeded to lean against her boyfriend's shoulder, causing him to yelp in surprise. And Natalie? He stuttered out, sweating a little. She merely glanced up at him with a sly grin and fluttering eyes, causing his cheeks to instantaneously go red. Mizo noticed. Ah, do you two want me to move or? He started to guess. Ah, Izuku gasped, flailing his arms about. And no, I mean, he stammered, evidently panicked and embarrassed. I think that's a yes, Ribbit, Suyu croaked as an answer. Ochako just stared ahead with wonder. She always knew Izuku wasn't much of a social butterfly, so being in a relationship was probably a big challenge for him. Was Natalie being so cuddly to try and push his boundaries? Or was she just taking advantage of the current free time they had? You all right, Uraraka? Mizo asked as he stood up from his seat, catching her attention as she blinked. You kinda spaced out there, he noted. Her cheeks flashed a bright pink. Oh, I'm fine, she claimed, letting out a nervous chuckle. From the adjacent room, Katsuki looked over with a scowl on his face. Humph, he huffed in disgust. He loathed the sentimentalities of his classmates sometimes. And he especially hated Izuku and Natalie being all cuddly. Kakin of the Bakugos, Denki called out suddenly, catching his attention as he looked over to see him and some of the other boys about to walk off. We're gonna go get cleaned up and hit the sack, he told him as Ijiro got to his feet from his seat. Night watch is all yours, the hardening quirk user exclaimed with a salute. It took a second for Katsuki to register the decision. What? Why me? He asked loudly in anger. Because you sat around the office all day, Hanta muttered in reply. Beads of sweat formed on the explosive teen's face. He growled in frustration, grimacing all the while as he knew they were right. I could come along if you'd like, Alice suddenly offered, catching his attention as he looked to see her gathering amongst the boys. I'm sure doing night watch all by yourself would be tiresome, she noted. Not to mention lonely, she added with a grin. Ooh, quite the offer, Denki pointed out with a cheeky expression. Gonna take her up on it, Bakugo? Ijiro asked of his friend. A light blush was on his cheeks, but he turned his head away. As if, he yelled, I can do a damn night watch all my own, he claimed as he stood up. Besides, the stripper's just gonna slow me down, he muttered, walking off to go get his costume. He shot Alice a look as he passed her by, which she returned before he left the room. Huh, she sighed. As always, he's so stubborn, she grumbled, about to head off as well. Allura, Mina chimed in, catching her attention as she stopped. She took notice of the pink-skinned girl holding up a pair of US sweatpants. I think these are yours, she pointed out in annoyance. Blinking twice, Alice looked down, seeing that she only had her underwear and white t-shirt on. Ah, she gasped as her face went beet red. Thank you, she squeaked quietly in gratitude, quickly reclaiming the garments from her friend. X. It was well into the evening in Kyushu at the Hero Safety Commission. Hawks was inside a conference room, crossing his arms as he looked up at the map display on the screen. It showed 3 red markings scattered throughout Japan, each indicating the location of a pro-hero. Inside the room as well were Yokimaru and the commission president. The heroes you see here were all attacked recently, the latter of the group said as more images came up of news reports surrounding the incidents. In addition, they've each lost their quirks, she mentioned. What? Yokimaru exclaimed in surprise as he stood up sharply, while Hawks blinked. None of them were able to identify their assailants, the president added. But it's quite strange that these attacks occurred after the pursuit of the League's cargo, she pointed out, glancing over at the wing hero. He put his hand onto his chin. Missing quirks? Huh. He inwardly uttered. The only groups that could be responsible are either the Shy Hasakai with their quirk-destroying bullets or All for One with his own quirk, he noted to himself. But both of them are in custody, he recalled, narrowing his eyes. The League definitely has a hand in this, he concluded through his thoughts after a moment. Hawks, the president said, getting his attention. We'd like for you to look into this, she insisted of him. It may lead you to the League, she mentioned. Don't worry, Prez, he remarked, heading towards the door. I'll be quick as I can be, he assured, grabbing the door handle and pulling it open, to reveal Sunset standing there. Hey, she greeted with her arms folded over her chest. She didn't look happy. Angel? Hawks uttered in surprise, causing the other commission members to look over and widen their eyes to see her. What are you doing here? He asked as she entered the conference room. I had a feeling you wanted to follow up on our investigation into the League's cargo the other night, she told him. And I figured you weren't at your agency, she mentioned. The wing hero grimaced, folding the collar of his jacket sheepishly over his mouth. I didn't realize the Omni Force was involved in our investigation, the commission president admitted as she approached. I've been involved ever since that Nabu attacked in Kyushu, Sunset replied. Plus, they attacked my daughter, she mentioned as she looked over at the map, and the heroes marked upon it. So what did you find out from Endeavor? Hawks asked as he trotted over. They were able to salvage the truck's GPS and download the route the League was taking, she responded. Apparently, they were supposed to arrive around Kansai, she told him. And they were pretty close by the time we stopped them, she mentioned, narrowing her eyes onto the map. Kansai, Hawks uttered out. That's where one of Pro's was attacked, he recalled as he blinked in surprise. Sunset stared curiously at the map. She then reached into the pocket of her leather jacket, pulling out a pair of red sports sunglasses and putting them over her eyes. Several images appeared on the lenses as they scanned the map. So these heroes were all attacked and lost their quirks? She inquired. Yep, Hawks answered. Guess now it's not a coincidence, he realized, folding his arms over his chest. Psycho Barrier, lasers, and Hydra, Sunset listed off. Those are all emitter-type quirks, she noted curiously. They're not from well-known pros either, Hawks mentioned. It's clear that whoever's doing this doesn't want too much of a trail for us to follow, he pointed out. Well, we'll follow it, Sunset stated. Indeed, the commission president agreed, catching their attentions. Miss Shimmer, I would be remiss if I didn't ask for your help in our investigation, she said to the Omni Force squadron leader. You've got it, she assured in response. A few moments later, she and Hawks were walking down the halls together. You really had to show me up back there, huh? The wing hero guessed, causing Sunset to chuckle. As to our suspect, I don't think he's eliminating quirks, she pointed out. I think we're looking at a second coming of All for One, she confessed, narrowing her eyes. Doesn't seem like Shigaraki's Mohawk said as they exited the commission building. Whoever or whatever was in that cargo is probably planning something big, he realized. Sunset activated her magic, letting her skin turn amber as her hair lengthened into a long ponytail, while her pony ears and wings appeared upon her form. Well, let's find out what. Keigo, she advised, spreading her wings before taking off. Hawks let off a sigh, but smiled. He spread his own wings and flew after her. X. Uno, Toru exclaimed, holding up a lone card in her invisible hand. Aw, darn it, Rhea yelled in frustration, having 6 cards in her hands. Tsuyu and Ochako each had 3. You're really good at this game, Toru, the frog-like girl complimented as she looked at her hand of cards. Yeah, no kidding, Ochako agreed, sweating nervously. Rhea hummed, wondering if the invisible girl was cheating. After putting down a red 7, the half-rainbow-haired girl looked over at Toru to see she'd have to draw another card. But to her dismay, she put down a green 7. Oh, come on, she complained. Tsuyu and Ochako giggled. They didn't think that Rhea would be so competitive when it came to things like this. They were playing their game in the girls' room of the building as several futons were spread about the room, acting as beds for the female students. Rachel was in the middle of doing push-ups next to her futon. Kyoka and Natalie were sitting on one together as the former was practicing with her bass guitar, while the latter listened contently. Momo was lying on hers reading a notebook, and Alice was looking outside at the bright night sky from her futon. Heyo, Mina greeted as she entered the room with a towel on over her body. It was evident that she just showered as water was dripping from her scruffy pink hair. Aw, you guys started Uno without me, she exclaimed, puffing out her cheeks in frustration. Sorry, Mina, Ochako apologized, sheepishly rubbing the back of her head. Well, I guess I can just join in next game, the pink-skinned girl muttered in realization. Anyways, shower's free, she called out. I'm sure a certain redhead would like to get some sweat off, she remarked, glancing cheekily over at Rachel, who was now alternating her hands to do one-handed push-ups. Yeah, 1 sec, she grunted out, moving herself into a handstand as she held firm. Whoa, nice, Toru complimented. With a deep breath, Rachel kept her balance. However, she failed to notice Mina's annoyed expression. She didn't want the Requip user overexert herself. And then she had an idea, letting off a wide grin. Hey Rhea, she said, catching the half-rainbow-haired girl's attention. I think Ray wants to tell you something, she pointed out, gesturing towards the Requip user. What's up, baby? Rhea asked. Her girlfriend's face instantaneously went red. Baby, she stammered out, losing her balance and falling onto her back in a loud yell. Seeing that, Mina couldn't help herself. PFFT, bah-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha, she laughed heartily, wrapping her arms over her stomach. Rachel lifted her head up and glared at her. Mina, she growled. I can't believe the almighty swordswoman who trained under Urza Scarlet lets her heart go pitter-pat when she hears her girlfriend call her baby, she noted, still laughing. Rachel didn't take too kindly to the remarks, moving her right foot behind Mina's ankle before tripping her. Whoa, she yelped, falling onto her backside. The Requip user got onto her feet. How about that, she remarked smugly, crossing her arms over her chest. Mina sat up. Okay, I deserved that, she admitted sheepishly. The two of them shared a chuckle before Rachel headed off to take her shower. Meanwhile, Kyoka strummed the strings of her bass guitar as she hummed a tune to herself. Natalie turned it into a song. If you want it, boy, you got it, Tilda, she echoed beautifully. Ain't you ever seen a princess be a bad bitch, Tilda? She sang. Kyoka smirked. Great pipes as usual, Nat, she complimented. And you haven't gotten rusty on bass, the Dragon Slayer mentioned with a bright smile. You know, I feel bad that we're going to be going back home in a few weeks, she confessed, glancing up for a moment in thought. Aside from what happened with those kids earlier, it's going to be sad to have to leave, she pointed out. That's true, Alice agreed, chiming into the conversation as she had overheard. But it's not like the island won't have its own new hero in residence, she pointed out to them. Exactly, Momo concurred with a nod, looking up from her book. We'll still be doing our best for all of the islanders, she assured as she smiled brightly. But it totally doesn't feel punk rock to just up and leave, Kyoka admitted, putting her instrument down. She then gasped lightly after a moment of thought. We should have some kind of celebration before we go, she suggested excitedly. A celebration? Momo repeated in confusion. Yeah, like a party, Kyoka answered. Just a little something for the islanders to remember us by as a send-off gift, she explained. Natalie gasped upon thinking of what that something could be. We should have a concert, she recommended. Her best friend's eyes lit up at the idea. Sweet, she exclaimed. Like the one we did for the school festival? Ochako inquired, having overheard the conversation along with the others playing Uno. Might be hard to do choreography in just a few weeks, Mina admitted as she looked up from her hand of cards. We can just do the concert, Natalie assured in response to their comments. Yeah, Kyoka agreed. Plus, our music is enough of a show for them already, she mentioned, laughing happily with her dragon slayer friend. Looking on, Momo smiled. The earphone jack quirk user wasn't always so sociable. But after the school festival in the fall, she was more of an outgoing person than ever, especially with Natalie being such a great friend to her. They really are quite the pair, Alice commented, catching the class deputy's attention. Natalie's always had that effect on people, she pointed out, seeing the other girls congregate and discuss what they'd try to do for this newly planned concert. In fact, if it wasn't for her, she continued, clasping her hands together, I'm not sure I would even be here in the hero course, she confessed. Really? Momo uttered in surprise as she got up and trotted over, undoing her hair tie in the meantime to let it fall. What makes you say that? She wondered curiously, sitting down next to Alice on her futon. The onyx-haired girl reached into her shirt and pulled out a silver necklace in the shape of a sword with a blue gem embedded into it. That's a long story, she replied vaguely while holding her trinket in the palm of her hand. The class deputy did want to know more, but also didn't want to pry if it was personal. She did have other questions, though. Why did you offer Bakugo help with patrolling tonight? She asked, arching an eyebrow. Huh, Alice sighed. If I know Katsuki, he'll just be on the lookout for anyone causing even a hint of trouble to attack, she noted, putting her left hand onto her cheek. Despite that, we've actually been getting along recently, she admitted to Momo's surprise. He's aggressive, but endearing in his own way, she mentioned, lightly grinning. Still, I'm sure he won't cause too much of a fuss, she assumed, lying down on her futon. Right, the class deputy half-heartedly agreed. Katsuki was well known for his behavior. What? Mina screamed from afar, causing her to glance over and see the flabbergasted look on her face. Toru, you're totally cheating, she accused of the invisible girl while holding 10 cards in her hands. No, I'm not, she argued. Momo giggled at their bickering. And all while the girls were prepared to wind down their day, they were prepared to take on their duties for tomorrow. Within a mountainous range lied an old warehouse shed. It was drab and dusty, along with the people inside. It was the temporary base of operations for the League of Villains. What the hell was that cargo we were hauling? Spinner asked with crossed arms. I'm curious as well, Compress admitted. Our grand act caused quite the stir, he pointed out. Don't tell me the heroes ended up getting it, Himiko Toga muttered. No, our source confirms that it's not in their possession, Dabai assured. That's a relief, Twice exclaimed, flashing a thumbs up, followed by, This really sucks, he yelled. The doc said that cargo was super important, and we lost it. he pointed out worriedly. Shigaraki, you gotta forgive me for screwing up, he pleaded. It was their fault, he accused, pointing at Spinner and the others. Hey! The lizard-like man shouted. Sitting amongst the group's chatter was a red-jacketed Tamura Shigaraki. He seemed exhausted. Who wouldn't be after the hell he endured to receive greater power? Or at least he would receive it. It's no one's fault, he said suddenly, causing his comrades to stop bickering. The doctor said that as long as the heroes didn't obtain the cargo, it'd be fine, he pointed out, standing up from his seat. But what the heck was that cargo anyway? Twice asked. Yeah, it's really mean to be kept in the dark like this, Himiko mentioned in frustration, putting her hands at her hips and puffing out her cheeks. Surely the doctor would have told you what we were hauling, Compress noted, hoping their leader would give them an answer. He merely started walking towards the door. Hey, where are you going? Twice yelled. I'll be back, Tamura replied, exiting the building. As he took a few steps forward onto the gray gravel beneath his feet, he started to think back. Prior to the cargo transport and prior to his eventual ascendance to power, he had a conversation with the doctor, who he only knew as Daruma Yujiko. The test subject should not be of your concern, Tamura Shigaraki, he had told him through a video call, as I promised. You will receive the power you so desire, he assured. But only after I've concluded my business, he mentioned firmly. The decay quirk user took a deep breath through his nose and exhaled. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the lone hand he had. His father's left hand. He put it onto his face. Tamura, a voice with a French accent said, catching his attention. He turned his head to see Amélie Lacroix atop the warehouse. Lacroix, he uttered, seeing her hop down to his side. We have company, she told him before they looked ahead. Approaching them were 4 figures. Tamura narrowed his eyes. They were Eon, Salem, Maul, and Akand Ogundimu. Seeing the latter enticed Amélie to grab her widow's kiss off of her back, setting it into its fully automatic mode. Stand down, her leader advised, holding out his right hand to her. We're just going to talk, he said, walking forward. She set her weapon onto her back, following him forward. Both groups met halfway, standing a couple yards apart from each other. There was nothing but silence between them. And then, this is his apprentice? Maul inquired, letting out a scoff. He is an epitome of weakness, he muttered, crossing his arms over his chest. Don't underestimate him, Maul, Eon advised with a grin. He and his small group were able to dismantle an army of thousands in just a day, he recalled as he looked over at Tamura. Including my former assassin, Akand mentioned as he looked over at Amélie. She glared back at him. What do you want? Tamura asked, getting everyone's attention. Ah, yes, Eon recalled, chuckling as he turned to the League of Villains leader. Dr. Yujiko wanted me to inform you that the testing phase has begun, he told him. Apparently, the current results have been most beneficial to us, he mentioned. Once we learn more, we'll update you and your posse, he assured, glancing over at Amélie. I appreciate that, Tamura replied after a moment. Anything else? He asked. Lie low until the testing phase has ended, Salem advised. The doctor will be sure to inform you of the next phase, she added. The Chronos Alliance members prepared to leave, with Eon and Maul walking away first. So you chose him for his conviction? Akand asked of Amélie, getting her attention. She didn't answer. He already knew it. HMPH, he scoffed, walking away after his colleagues. That left Salem. Why are you so concerned with us, knowing exactly who the doctor is testing before Tamura's operation? Amélie asked of her, just as she started to turn around, causing her to stop. What does it matter to you, assassin? She questioned back. Before the blue-skinned woman could retort. You're related to the test subject, Tamura suddenly said to their surprise. Is that it? He inferred. Salem turned and glared at him. Take my advice and stay out of this until things are settled, she insisted sternly. I wouldn't want the next symbol of evil to end up in trouble. she mentioned, turning around and walking off without another word. As the four Chronos Alliance members went on their way, Emily walked up to Tamura's side. They looked to each other and nodded. They were going to find out more, whether their allies wanted them to or not. X. Huh. A little girl breathed frantically as she ran down an alleyway. She was hurriedly in pursuit of a trio of schoolgirls. She brought herself to a stop, panting as she put her hands onto her knees. None of the schoolgirls had taken notice of her yet. Her lips quivered as she balled her fists, slowly building up the courage to, "Hey," she shouted. The schoolgirls stopped, turning around to see the little girl in the light blue dress. "Why, you have something. That belongs to me," she stuttered in accusation, pointing at them. One of the schoolgirls had a heavy amount of makeup on her face. She smugly smirked. "You talking about this?" she inquired, holding up a necklace in her right hand that had a sword-shaped pendant with a blue jewel embedded into it. "Why, yeah, that's mine," the little girl claimed. Her legs were shaking. "Really?" the schoolgirl wondered, seemingly unconvinced. "I found it just lying on the ground," she pointed out as pulled the trinket away. "You know what they say, kid," she continued smugly, turning around. "Finders keepers," she remarked, laughing with her friends as they started walking away. The little girl trembled in frustration. Her lips quivered and her teeth were grit. "Give," she managed to voice out, causing the three girls to peek over their shoulders at her. "Give it back," she screamed, sticking out her hands before unleashing a gust of water from them. It splashed onto the lead schoolgirl of the trio, drenching her completely. "Zoom," her friends exclaimed simultaneously in shock. Fortunately, she didn't seem to be harmed by the water. The same couldn't be said for her makeup, though. "Huh," she uttered, looking over at a nearby window to see her reflection. The makeup running down her face made her look absolutely horrifying. "Ah," she stuttered out, shaking in disbelief. Her friends were just as horrified. I'm sorry," the little girl apologized, stepping back nervously. The girl known as Tsum had blood vessels about to pop her head. All of a sudden, her fingernails grew out and sharpened, looking like knives. "Ah, Tsum," one of her friends gasped. "She's just a kid," the other pointed out. But it was no use. "She's dead is what she is," Tsum shouted, running towards the little girl. Out of fright, she shut her eyes, bracing herself for whatever the schoolgirl was about to do to her. Suddenly, there was a rush of wind. When nothing happened for a moment, she peeked her eyes open curiously, and she gasped. Tsum's fingernails were just a foot in front of her face, but she had been stopped as a large hand had grabbed her wrist. The little girl looked to see that it originated from none other than All Might, who wore his trademark smile. "Young lady, I believe you have something that belongs to this little one," he pointed out to Tsum, who was trembling in shock. He let go of her wrist, allowing her to step back and retract her fingernails. She quickly grabbed the trinket she had. "Here, take it," she yelled, tossing it over to let the little girl catch it. "We're sorry," she stuttered in apology, quickly running off. "Tsum," one of her friends cried out as she passed them by. "Wait for us," the other exclaimed, chasing after her. As they left the alleyway, the little girl looked back at the necklace in her small hands. She smiled happily. "Thank you," she said in gratitude to the #1 hero, getting his attention. "It's no trouble, little one," he replied, crouching down beside her. "That was quite brave of you," he mentioned, setting his right hand atop her head of onyx hair. After a moment of looking at her and her trinket, he started to recognize who she was. "You're young Fullbuster's child, aren't you?" he guessed. The little girl nodded. "I'm Alice," she introduced. "I thought I knew where that necklace had come from," All Might noted with a chuckle. Alice giggled. "My daddy gave it to me today," she pointed out, stepping back to put it on over her head and around her neck. "He said it was just something that looked cool and didn't mean much," she mentioned, holding the sword-shaped pendant in her hand. But I didn't want to lose it, she admitted. Because it's a gift from your father, the hero concluded, causing her to blink in surprise as she looked back at him. It may be just another trinket to him, he continued. But you've given it a new meaning for yourself, he told her, placing his hand atop her head again. Hold on to that belief you have, he advised. It will carry you through the trials and tribulations of life, he assured, standing up. Now let's get you reunited with your parents, he recommended, offering his right hand to her. Okay, she replied with a smile, happily letting him take her hand. As they walked out of the alleyway, the bright light of the sun shined down on them. At that moment, Alice awoke. She sat up to see that it was just a dream as her female classmates were lying about and snoozing soundly. Well, almost soundly. She could hear Natalie snoring as her sleeping form was sprawled upon her futon, as the covers had been completely discarded. That made Alice smile, though. The Dragon Slayer was as much of a confidant for her as was vice versa. She got up from her futon and approached the sliding door leading out to the balcony. As she shut the door behind, Natalie's eyes slowly fluttered open. Huh? She tiredly uttered out, sitting up and glancing over to see her friend outside. She looking up at the clear night sky, taking out her necklace from beneath her shirt. The advice All Might gave her that day lingered in her head. While her father had given it to her as a simple gift he thought she'd like, she held on to the belief that it was something more. That it was his way of always being by her side. If it hadn't been for that day, she began to herself, I probably wouldn't be here, she admitted inwardly as she grinned, staring back at the starry sky. You're up late, a familiar voice commented, catching her attention as she looked back to see Natalie there, shutting the sliding door behind her as she ventured onto the balcony. Sorry if I woke you, Alice apologized in advance. It's okay, the Dragon Slayer assured, walking up to her side. So what's up? She asked curiously. The Ice and Water Mage chuckled. Do you remember the day you convinced me to come that parade with All Might in it? She inquired back. Oh yeah, Natalie exclaimed upon recalling the event. You lost your clothes during the parade and had to look everywhere for M, she remembered, snickering a little. Alice wasn't annoyed. It was all in the past. I lost this necklace, too, she mentioned, holding it by its sword-shaped pendant. Some girls had taken it, and I tried to get it back myself, she recalled. That's when All Might arrived to help, she noted. Natalie giggled upon remembering. You were pretty much starstruck, she pointed out. And I have you to thank for that, Alice added to her surprise. If you hadn't made me go that day, I probably wouldn't have even considered going to UA with you, she confessed. Natalie blinked in surprise, but then smiled. All Might's really inspired both of us, huh? She realized, wrapping her left arm around her friend's shoulders. She smiled back. Indeed, she agreed, wrapping her own arm around the Dragon Slayer's shoulders in a warm semi-embrace. At that moment, they heard grunting from afar. Curious to see what it was, the two of them let go of each other before they ventured towards the edge of the balcony, looking over the wall. Out in front of the building by the stone fence was Izuku, who was practicing his kicks as he swung his legs again and again. Deku's still going plus ultra as usual, his girlfriend pointed out quietly from above. Alice nodded in agreement, though she looked over at Natalie in concern. A discussion they had not too long ago had Izuku as the subject, and it also involved All Might. Down below, the freckled teen decided to take a breather as he stopped his kicks, putting his hands onto his knees as he panted heavily. In my current state, I can only use one for all at 20%, he noted to himself, looking at his extremities as he held them out. I max out after that, he added inwardly, closing his hands into fists. Sweat was trickling heavily down his face. He's been practicing all night. I need to work even harder, so I can make this quirk my own someday, he stated firmly through his thoughts. Deku, Natalie uttered from afar, clutching the wall of the balcony with concern in her eyes. Alice had the same sense of worry. But then she noticed someone approaching the temporary agency. It was Katsuki, dressed in his costume as he was still on his patrol. As he approached the entrance, he took notice of his rival and stopped. He then turned to head towards him. "Kakin," Izuku yelped upon noticing. "Hey, how's the patrol going?" he asked, trying to start a casual conversation. "Looks like you're getting a little better with one for all," his rival noted as he stepped closer. Natalie and Alice widened their eyes slightly before they looked at each other in confusion. Were they actually talking about the power All Might once had? "Ah," Izuku gasped. "We can't talk about that here," he shouted quietly as he put his index finger vertically in front of his mouth. "What if somebody's listening?" he inferred as he glanced back at the entry doors. Natalie and Alice ducked beneath the balcony wall to avoid being seen. But the former's eyes were shaking. All the suspicions she had about All Might's power and where it had gone. Now her questions were being answered, and it scared her. "I'm not a big fan of waiting, Katsuki grumbled as he walked past his rival. "Oh, trust me. I think I know that better than anybody," Izuku muttered in response with an exhausted look on his face. "You haven't changed much since we were kids," he pointed out with a slight shrug. Katsuki stomped his left foot down, coming to a stop. "So hurry up and make that quirk your own instead of his," he insisted firmly. "Then we can finally have a real fight," he pointed out, turning to face his rival as he perked up and looked over at him in surprise. "I'll prove it to you once and for all," he remarked, holding out his left hand. "I'm gonna be the #1 hero, and you're gonna be in my dust," he declared firmly. Izuku fully turned to face him. "Yeah," he responded, raising his scarred right hand and closing it into a fist. "I'll work as hard as I have to until this power is truly mine," he promised. "And then I'll be the greatest hero in the world," he stated to his rival. "Yeah, whatever," he muttered back in response. "I'm gonna be greater than the greatest," he remarked confidently. Izuku chuckled as he grinned. "Erg," Katsuki growled with a scowl. Meanwhile, the two girls who had been secretly listening were staying crouched behind the balcony wall. "Natalie?" Alice uttered, trying to get her friend's attention. "Are you all right?" she asked in concern. The Dragon Slayer let out a deep exhale. "I need to know," she said quietly. "And I need to know it from him," she affirmed, starting to stand up. Alice followed suit. But just as they looked out at their classmates, "Excuse me," a familiar voice uttered, catching Izuku and Katsuki's attention as they turned to see Katsuma standing at the gateway. Natalie and Alice were surprised to see the little boy as well. "Katsuma," the freckled teen said. "Why are you here?" he asked. The little boy looked very anxious. To tell you that," he started to say as his sun hat veiled his eyes. "There's a villain," he exclaimed frightfully. "A villain? Where?" "All right, brat, start talking," Katsuki demanded, shoving Izuku aside while also interjecting his shouts. Upon hearing the revelation, Alice and Natalie nodded to each other. They quietly made their way back inside before hurrying out of the girls' room, prepared to help. X. Stopped at a stoplight in a flatbed white truck was a middle-aged man with light brown hair and brown eyes. His smartphone was mounted onto a stand in his vehicle, playing a video message for him. On the video itself were Katsuma and Mahoro in front of a field of foliage. "Hi there, Dad. I hope you're having fun at work," the little boy exclaimed as he waved his hands. "And don't worry about us. Everything's just fine here," the little girl next to him assured with a wave of her right hand. "I'll take real good care of Katsuma until you get back," she promised. Their father chuckled. "I'm sure you will," he noted confidently, now recording his own message to send to his children. "Well, kids, you be good," he advised. "Maybe when I get home, we can all, he uttered, interjecting himself as he noticed something approaching. Rather, charging towards him. It was Chijiro. He rammed into the stopped truck head-on, shattering its windshield as it blew back. The brown-haired man fell onto the pavement with a grunt, rolling to a stop on his stomach. As he tried to push himself up, he glanced over to see 3 more figures. They were Kuruka, Hoyo, and Nine. The latter approached, now wearing a blazer and dress pants of a pale lilac color over his suit. "I've finally found it," he remarked as his eyes shined a bright yellow, scanning the man his colleagues had attacked. "What? What do you mean?" he asked weakly, sweating all the while. His eyes widened with fright. "Don't worry, I won't kill you," Nine assured, reaching down and latching onto the man's head with both of his hands. "But," he continued, "I will take your quirk," he said as a greenish light flowed up his body from the man's. "Ah," he grunted out, becoming strained by the process. Dark clouds suddenly formed overhead, shrouding the night sky entirely. Nine lifted his captive, continuing the process as the purple lines streaked over his eyes started to disappear. Once he finished, he dropped the now unconscious man to the floor. Thunder boomed overhead. Lifting up his right arm, Nine swung it down. And with that, bolts of lightning rained onto the city one after another. Several blocks were torched by the resulting explosions. The city itself immediately went dark as fires spread about, with Nine and his cohorts at the epicenter. "We finally have everything we need," Chijiro noted, balling his fists. "Our dream will become a reality," Hoyo exclaimed, admiring the surrounding chaos. "The new world we fought to build," Kuruka began as she outstretched her arms. "I can almost see it," she proclaimed. It was a sight to behold, a sight that Nine longed for. But suddenly, he buckled over onto his knees, clutching his stomach. "Nine!" Hoyo screamed as he and the others went over to him. He was trembling. "No," he uttered out, feeling weakened all of a sudden. "This is wrong," he realized to the surprise of his colleagues. "This quirk, it only works for type A cells," he noted. Everyone gasped. "So then," Chijiro began as he grit his teeth, "everything we did was for nothing?" he inquired angrily. Hoyo growled in frustration. It seemed all the work they had put in for their plan was all for nothing. But at that moment, Kuruka noticed something. "There's a still way," she said, catching their attentions. She had gone over to pick up the smartphone of their victim. Still upon it was the paused recording of Katsuma and Mahoro's video message. These must be his children, she realized, showing it to Nine. "Of course," he uttered in realization despite the sweat trickling down his face and the purple lines forming on his skin. "And quirks are hereditary," he recalled. "We need to find out where they are," Hoyo concluded. A few moments later, he and Chijiro were rummaging through the pockets of the victim's pants and jacket. "Found his wallet," the wolf-headed man said, holding up the object in his left hand. He opened it up and pulled out the man's license. "Nabu Island, huh?" he read off of it. "Then that's where we're heading," Nine declared as he attempted to stand up, only to falter forward as Kuruka caught him, holding him upright. "Take it easy," she advised. "We'll go to the nearest harbor and get a boat ready," she assured to him. The four were prepared to head off. "Stop right there," a voice called out. Kuruka, Hoyo, and Chijiro whipped around. Nine glanced back to see who was there. It was Sting, alongside Elsa and Chariot. "Heroes? Here?" Hoyo exclaimed in shock. "We did put on quite a show," Chijiro admitted with a growl. "Nine," Kuruka said, wondering what they should do. "Hold them off," their leader insisted. "Kill them if you have to," he added. "Fine by me," Chijiro replied, rushing forward towards the trio of Omni Force members. Elsa quickly reacted, shooting out beams of blue light from her palms onto the ground to bring forth a huge ice wall to block off the Chimera quirk user. "Ice?" Hoyo yelped. "Go," Nine said to his other 2 colleagues, enticing them to move. In the meantime, he got to his feet and haggardly trotted away from the conflict. Chariot leapt over the ice wall, drawing her wand and making a blade of green light shoot out from it. Chijiro jumped back to evade her as she slashed downward, leaving a deep cut in the pavement. "HMPH," he scoffed, clenching his fists tightly. Sting and Elsa then came over the wall, with the former cloaking his right arm within a bright white light. White Dragon. He was interrupted as burgundy bandages wrapped around his arm suddenly, pulling him away and sending him crashing into an adjacent building. Sting! Elsa cried out. She looked to see that the bandages had originated from those wrapped around Hoyo's arms. They were enveloping pieces of debris lying about, transforming into humanoid shapes that he made float about towards the former queen. She took on a serious expression, readying her hands. "Oh," Sting grunted in agony, rubbing the back of his head as he emerged from the building. He barely had a second to react in time, ducking from the needle like pieces of hardened shot from Kurika. He grimaced a little, running off to his left to evade more needles that were sent his way. "Ira!" Chijiro roared as he threw punch after punch towards Chariot, who narrowly evaded each one. She then found herself backed against the ice wall, about to take a powerful right hook from the wolf-headed man. "Vega Walrus," she chanted, causing a greenish light to shroud her feet. She threw up her left one to block her foe's fist. They found themselves at a deadlock. Chijiro smirked. "Not bad, witch," he remarked. "But it's gonna take a lot more than that to stop me," he mentioned confidently. "Then I'll be happy to oblige," Chariot responded, leaping up with her right foot. A green fireball formed upon the tip of her wand. "Miroa," she yelled, firing off the fireball as it grew to a gargantuan size. Chijiro narrowly managed to evade it as it exploded upon crashing against the ground. In the meantime, Elsa shot icy rays one after another onto the mummified pieces of debris being manipulated by Hoyo, freezing them. Unfortunately, it didn't stop the villain from having his mummified puppets lunge out at her. She leapt back to evade them as they shattered into pieces upon hitting the ground. "White Dragon Holy Ray," Sting roared, gathering a vast amount of white light on his hands in the shape of an orb before it unleashed several beams towards Kurika. Breaking apart the tie surrounding her hair, she hardened streaks of it into sharp blades, blocking the beams as they pushed her back. She grimaced in frustration, but then glanced over to see that 9 had left. "He's gone," she called out to her comrades, getting their attentions. "Then it's time to go," Chijiro realized as he and Hoyo leapt over to their female friend's side. Taking a deep breath, the wolf-headed man expelled a stream of red fire out towards the 3 Omni Force members. Reacting quickly again, Elsa formed another wall of ice to shield them from the flames, engulfing the surrounding area in steam. It cleared only a few moments as the thunder was still booming overhead. "They're gone," Chariot realized as she and her comrades walked out into the open, seeing no sign of their foes. "I can track them," Sting yelled, about to take off. "Wait," Elsa called out, making him stop as he turned to see her kneeling down next to the unconscious man the villains had attacked. "We should check around and make sure the citizens are okay and evacuated," she advised seriously. "Right," Chariot agreed with a nod. She looked out at the chaotic scene sprawled throughout the city. None of the villains we fought seemed to have a power on this wide of a scale, she noted inwardly, remembering that 9 was the one who escaped the battle. That man must be the one responsible for taking quirks, she realized. She and Sting hurried off to go look for anyone in trouble, while Elsa stayed behind with the villain's victim. Just what were their enemies planning? X. "What are you tagging along for, Deku?" Katsuki shouted angrily, shooting out blast after blast from the palm of his right hand, propelling himself forward along the road. Katsuma was held in his left arm, looking obviously panicked from carried in such a manner. Chasing after them with green sparks crackling over his form was Izuku. "'Cause if there really is a villain, you might need backup," he yelled, responding to his rival's question. "Like I'd ever need help from you," he roared back, blasting himself into the air, causing Katsuma to lose his hat. "Hey, where is the damn villain anyway?" he asked the little boy. Over there in those castle ruins," he replied, pointing towards the mountain-like landmass connected to the island by just a straight path of sand. You could have told me that sooner, Katsuki pointed out in frustration, blasting towards the location speedily. Www. Katsuma screamed with tears of fright flying out from his eyes. Oh man, Izuku muttered as he tried desperately to keep up with them, catching the little boy's hat. Deku, a familiar voice called out, causing him to look back and gasp to see Natalie and Alice running up beside him. Natalie, Alice, he exclaimed in surprise. What are you guys doing here? He asked. We couldn't help but overhear Katsuki's excitement over a villain being here. The ice and water mage muttered in reply. Figured you guys could use an extra pair of hands, even if Kaken doesn't want it, Natalie mentioned with a sheepish grin. I'm just worried he's going to get Katsuma hurt, Izuku admitted, picking up his pace as he sped along the sandy pathway with the two girls. Meanwhile, the little boy and the explosive teen had arrived at the scene. The villain was a giant praying mantis who noticed the new arrivals and glared at them. That's it, Katsuma said. Go hide, Katsuki advised, tossing him aside. Katsuma, Izuku screamed as he ran hurriedly forward. It didn't seem like he was going to be able to catch the boy, but thankfully, Alice launched herself forward with a spray of water from the soles of her feet. She reached out and grabbed Katsuma before he could hit the ground. Are you all right? She inquired to him as they landed down. He merely nodded, staring at her in amazement. In the meantime, Katsuki blasted himself up to the beastly mantis' eye level in a couple of flips. Stun grenade, he bellowed, firing off a large-scale flash of light into the creature's eyes. However, it didn't seem to flinch, let alone get blinded as it raised its front legs to attack. Katsuki ceased his upon noticing. Wait a second, he muttered, starting to realize something. The mantis swung its front right leg down fiercely. Kaken, Izuku cried out, seeing his rival land down and do nothing as the leg appeared to strike him. Huh? Natalie uttered in surprise. She expected an explosive of dust from such an impact. But there was nothing. All of a sudden, they saw Katsuki walk out through the leg, completely unfazed. Had he actually known what was coming? He reeled his right arm back before slamming his palm against the ground, firing off an explosion that created a shockwave of wind. As it blew about fiercely, it ended up knocking back a hidden Myhero. Ah, she gasped, falling onto her rear end. Oh, she grumbled in pain. The mantis then faded away into thin air. It's a gone, Izuku noted, evidently astonished. An illusion? Alice guessed as she put Katsuma down onto his feet, allowing him to reclaim his hat from the freckled teen. Hey, that hurt, Myhero grumbled, still holding onto her hat while rubbing her sore behind. No fair, she complained. That thing was way scary and you just stood there, she yelled in frustration. Izuku blinked in surprise. Her again, he recalled as Natalie and Alice stepped forward. While Myhero was adjusting her hat to keep it firmly atop her head, Katsuki stomped up to her. So, I'm guessing you're the idiot who made that illusion, he guessed. She gulped in fright, audibly. How did you know that it was an illusion? She inquired as she put her pointer finger onto her cheek and glanced off to the side, hoping he wouldn't have an idea. But he did. 'Cause I'm not stupid, he shouted. It didn't have a shadow, he recalled, having noticed after using his stun grenade. So you little brat, he continued in an infuriated tone. Is taunting heroes a hobby of yours? He guessed. Well, he yelled. Huh, yep, Myhero yelped, crawling back out of fright. She could feel the explosive teen's rage burning off of him. Your cheap tricks won't work on me, 'cause I'm not like any hero you met before, he pointed out with gritted teeth. You're looking at the next number one. The guy who'll be better than All Might was in his prime, he declared firmly. The name's Katsuki Bakugo, he exclaimed. I'm telling you right now, kid, you picked the wrong person to mess with, he roared angrily. His expression was devilish if anything now. But being somewhat courageous, Katsuma jogged over to him. Please don't yell at my big sister, sir, he pleaded to him. Huh? He yelled back. Ah! Kastama yelped in fright, shivering. You were in on it too, weren't you? Katsuki inquired with blood vessels bulging at his neck and face. Come here, he ordered angrily. Stop. They're just kids, Kaken, Izuku pleaded as he grabbed his rival from behind, pulling him away. Get your damn hands off me before I break 'em, he shouted back, elbowing him in the face repeatedly. Guys, quit it, Natalie yelled, running in and tackling the two boys to the ground in a flurry of dust and dirt. Just be glad it wasn't a real villain, Izuku pointed out desperately, all while Mihoro went over to a flabbergasted Katsuma, grabbing him by his wrist. Getting away with this crap is exactly why kids are such brats these days, Katsuki noted angrily before noticing the two children jogging off. Where do you think you're going, huh? He roared, crawling speedily after them, only for Izuku and Natalie to keep pulling him back. We told you to leave them alone, the former of the couple cried out, still wrestling with his rival. Yeah, just knock it off, the latter pleaded. You think I care? Katsuki shouted back at them. I don't take orders from either of you, he stated angrily as the two children were heading off into the distance. The explosive teen knocked Izuku and Natalie off of him before running after the kids, roaring all the while. Kaken, stop, his rival begged, activating his full cowling with green sparks crackling over his form before chasing after him alongside his girlfriend. Having seen the whole ordeal, Alice let out a deep sigh before joining in the pursuit. The two children were halfway across the path back to the main part of the island, but Katsuki wasn't too far behind. Come back here, you brats, he bellowed, blasting himself forward with an explosion from his palms. Both Mihoro and Katsuma shrieked in fright. However, Alice suddenly leapt out from the water with a splash, landing in front of them with her arms outstretched. Katsuki, that's enough, she shouted. They've learned their lesson, so there's no need to hurt them, she pointed out. But the explosive teen continued his approach. At that moment, Mihoro blinked as she had come up with a daring plan. She let go of her brother and ran up behind Alice. Sorry about this, lady, she apologized in advance, catching her attention. What are you? Ah, she yelped, feeling herself get pushed forward. As Katsuki landed in front of them, the ice and water mage fell onto him before they both hit the sand. Okay, let's get out of here, Mihoro advised, running over to grab Katsuma by his left wrist and run off with him. In the meantime, Izuku and Natalie ran up to their classmates. Kaken, Alice, the former cried out. Are you guys okay? Both of them stopped talking, widening their eyes. They were stunned by what had happened. At the same time, Katsuki and Alice opened their eyes. It took them a moment to find that their lips were touching. Ah! The ice and water mage yelped in embarrassment as she crawled back off of the explosive teen, who seemed to be completely stunned. Kaken, Izuku stuttered, wondering how his rival was processing what had just happened. He and Alice had just kissed. Accidentally, but it still counted. But the fact that it was an accident at all pissed him off. He growled loudly to everyone's surprise. Uh-oh, Natalie uttered in realization. That brat's dead, he bellowed in declaration. It took all three of his classmates to hold him back for the rest of the hour. By the time the Shimano children made it back to the main island, they were too tired to make it back to their house. They ended up finding themselves sitting in a clearing amidst a field of stalks. Katsuma started up at the stars in wonder and shame. He felt awful about tricking the aspiring heroes, especially Katsuki after how he reacted. Those heroes aren't just useless, his sister started to comment. They're really mean, too, she complained with a huff of frustration. Her brother clutched the strap of his bag tightly. But they still came to help, he pointed out, catching her attention. That girl saved me from the mean one, he recalled. And he wasn't scared to face the villain you made, he added to her. she hummed in frustration, puffing out her cheeks. Her plan had failed yet again. She wondered if she could ever succeed now. Grrr, Katsuki growled as he stomped into Aogi Heights. The sound of his teeth grinding was like nails on a chalkboard. Outside behind him were Izuku, Natalie, and Alice. The latter of the group was completely red in the face. That was embarrassing, she muttered out with a deep sigh. At least he didn't see you naked again, Natalie noted, attempting to console her. Unfortunately, it seemed to make her feel worse as she slouched in defeat. Izuku watched on as his rival took off his grenade gauntlets and mask. He was pissed by all means. But the freckled teen couldn't help but notice the hint of a blush on his cheeks, albeit an angry blush. What exactly would he be mad about? Guess we should be glad that we got Kakin calmed down enough to come back, he pointed out to the girls, getting their attentions. Hopefully, those kids don't do another one of those pranks, he added as he sighed. Didn't you say you met them earlier? Alice inquired. Yep, Natalie answered. It turned out that Mahoro kid lied about Katsuma going missing, she mentioned to her surprise. Huh, she sighed. Really hope she learned her lesson, she muttered. Well, we should probably get some rest now, Izuku advised, about to head inside. Indeed, Alice agreed as she was prepared to follow him in. However, Natalie stayed behind. She stared at her boyfriend's back, remembering what he was to become, who he was aiming to succeed. Deku, wait, she said, causing him to stop and turn around. What's up, Natalie? He asked. She held onto her left arm nervously. This wasn't something she wanted to do, but she needed to know the truth, and not just for her sake. I wanted to ask you about something, she responded. Her boyfriend blinked in surprise. Is something wrong? He asked out of concern as he approached her. She bit her bottom lip, but she steeled herself. Do you have All Might's power? She asked finally, metaphorically ripping off the bandage. Slowly, Izuku's eyes widened. What? He stuttered out, thinking he had misheard her. Look, it's just, she started to say, clutching her arm tightly. I've kind of figured that with All Might's retirement, the way your quirk works, and knowing how much you admire him, she listed off. I just thought it seemed obvious, she admitted. Plus, I've known All Might as long as you have, maybe longer, she pointed out in addition. And I've known that his quirk could be transferred to someone else, she mentioned, unable to look her boyfriend in the eye. This was likely a secret she was never supposed to know. A secret that could turn their relationship into something worse. Guilt racked her mind. Natalie, Alice uttered, wondering how Izuku would react to all of this. He was processing everything. She knew. Not just her, but Alice. And yet, he remained somewhat calm. Unlike with Katsuki fighting him at Yua that night, he knew these girls. They didn't find out because of some stupid mistake he made. They found out on their own. I'm sorry, Deku. His girlfriend apologized suddenly, making him perk up in surprise. If it's totally between you and All Might, I understand, she assured to him. I won't tell anyone. No, Izuku suddenly interrupted to her surprise. You deserve to know, he said firmly. She blinked out of astonishment, as did Alice. The freckled teen took a deep breath. My quirk isn't my own, he admitted, looking down at his scarred right hand. In fact, it was passed down to me from All Might himself, he confessed, closing his hand into a fist. Both girls widened their eyes. It was? Alice stuttered out. Izuku nodded. That day, he started to recall, thinking back to when he recklessly ran into a fiery street just because he wanted to save Katsuki. Even though he had advised him to jump off a building earlier. He told me I could become a hero, he remembered. And I did everything I could to meet his expectations, he added. Even though I was quirkless back then, I still fought with all my might to reach that level, he noted with an empathetic look in his eyes. Natalie was stunned. He was telling her everything, and he wasn't lying. That day in Camino, When All Might said it was your turn, he continued. That was to me, he said, putting his left hand over his heart. I'm still far from making this power my own, he admitted as he clutched his t-shirt. But I will, he affirmed. And I'll be the greatest hero I can be. For everyone who's supported me, he added firmly. Deku, his girlfriend uttered out, completely astonished. The selflessness of her boyfriend knew no bounds. He took on such a burden, to become the next one to rise up and take All Might's place. She trembled as tears built up in her eyes. I'm sorry, she stuttered in apology, letting out a sniffle. I should have known better than to just ask you like that, she noted, not noticing him walking up to her. He grabbed her by her shoulders, interrupting her again. Like I said, you deserve to know, he exclaimed. I've hurt you worse than I've hurt myself with every injury I suffered trying to control this power. He recalled, glancing down in shame. Natalie, you're someone who's stuck by my side through all of that. Even when you're mad at me, he pointed out. That's the reason he caught himself in the nick of time, shutting his mouth. His girlfriend blinked. The reason you, what? She inquired. A light blush formed on his cheeks as he pursed his lips. The reason I trust you, yeah, he stammered out in response, regaining his composure as he moved his hands down to take hold of hers. I really do trust you, Natalie, he assured with a smile. And I know I can trust you too, Alice, he added, looking over to the ice and water mage. Right? He inquired. She blinked in surprise. Oh, of course, she stuttered as a reply. You have my word, Izuku, she promised with a slight bow. Great, he said with a grin. He then turned back to his girlfriend. She was somewhat speechless. Was he about to say what she thought he would? He leaned his head in and kissed her forehead gently. Good night, Natalie, he remarked before letting go of her hands and heading back into the temporary agency. That went better than I expected, Alice noted quietly as she trotted over to her friend, who was still silent. Are you okay? She asked in concern. He almost said it, she realized with shaking eyes. She never expected Izuku to actually have the courage to almost confess. And it was shocking that he was about to do it first. By morning, the blacked-out city was quickly in recovery. Heroes were spread about with the police and firefighters, taking care of the heavily hit areas of the city. Amongst them were Chariot, Sting, and Elsa. They helped with putting out fires and evacuating people. All while that was happening, Sunset and Hawks were overlooking the scene from afar. What a mess, the latter muttered out, stuffing his hands into his pockets. If there's a bright side to all this, we know there are 4 assailants involved in these attacks, the Omni Force squadron leader pointed out to him. But we only know 3 out of 4, he retorted. Sunset sighed, putting on her proto-glasses. Images appeared in the lenses, showing off headshots of the known criminals. Chijiro Kon, Karuka Hasaki, and Hoyo Makihara, she listed off before taking off the specs. All 3 aren't well known, but they're dangerous based on what the others said, she noted, looking over to her husband and the other Omni Force members on the scene. I'm more concerned about our mysterious 4th assailant, Hawks admitted. You know, the one with apparently the same power as All for One? He inquired sarcastically. Okay, I get it, Sunset grumbled, rolling her eyes. From what we know, he's not in any police database, she noted. Distinguishing features? Hawks questioned curiously. Long white hair, gray eyes, likely in his 30s. The equestrian magic user listed off. He was wearing a blazer and pants over what Sting said was a full body suit, including a mask over his nose and mouth, she mentioned thoroughly. Hawks put his hand onto his chin and thought. The man they attacked, he wasn't a hero, he noted. The brown-haired man had already been taken to a nearby hospital for treatment, and he had yet to regain consciousness. Have we identified him yet? Sunset asked. No, the wing hero responded with a shake of his head. We couldn't find any form of identification for him, he pointed out. I'm guessing our suspect doesn't want us to know what quirk he stole, he inferred. So we're at a dead end, Sunset realized, crossing her arms over her chest. For now, Hawks responded. But why would he want to hide what quirk he stole, he wondered. As the two of them surveyed the destruction amongst the others, watching them from afar were Tamura and Emily. They too were curious about this new villain that was stealing quirks.